Hello everybody and welcome to your second edition of Scribefest here from the beautiful city of Norwich. My name is Mel Moritz and we are joined by CEO John Fagan and we will be your hosts for today. Welcome John.
Welcome, how are you doing?
I'm great actually.
It's been very calm this morning, hasn't it?
I think you're a liar.
Yeah, it's been completely hectic.
We're trying our best, aren't we?
So we are doing something slightly different this time. We're live streaming. We've got a professional company here, so hopefully you appreciate the quality of the live stream. And actually, the real story is we've hired these three experts because we can't manage that mute button, can we? We keep failing, so we've got these guys here doing that. But yes, we're here from Norwich. Norwich used to be called Northwick, and Wick is an old word for a port, an inland port, but that's kind of a boring fact, isn't it? More exciting facts that we used to have 365 pubs in this small little area here. So you had enough, you could go to a different pub every day of the year. We also had 52 churches, so every Sunday you could, repent your sins from the... But I'm sure, is there any famous people?
Yeah, we do have a few national treasures actually. We've got Stephen Fry and we also have Olivia Colman.
Is she from Coleman's Mustard at all? That's what...
No, not related that I know of. I don't know, maybe any of our listeners or any of our viewers know. We also have Delia Smith.
Delia,
And
yes.
does she own? She's got something to do with
she's got
the Canaries.
ownership of the Canaries, our local football team is in the Premier League now. And we've got to say Alan Partridge.
Oh yeah, Alpha Papa.
Yeah, so good old Alan Partridge. Yes. So Scribefest is really about bringing the town and parish communities together. So that's really clerks, RFOs and councillors. And in the future we might even be brave enough to bring in residents because we really want to get everyone involved. So what are we expecting on the agenda?
So today it really is about taking something away. It's about learning and growing from our expert speakers that we've invited here. So I really hope that everybody will find some value in today, what we have to offer. It is also a highly interactive session, John, so we would really like for everybody that's viewing to join in and let us know what you need, what you want, but most importantly, we also want you to ask questions. So while the speaker is talking and you think of something particular that you would like to ask, if you could use the little chat button at the bottom of your screen and type it in. We do have our beautiful support team here that are looking out for your comments and they will come in and they'll ask your question. Those that we don't get round to answering today, because you can imagine there's quite a few, I think we're ready for about 650 people joining us today. We will get back to you in an email, so make sure that you do put your stuff in there.
Shall we test out the chat?
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, so we've got some people saying good morning, but
Lovely.
Could you shout out where you're from right now, and maybe if you have an interesting fact, such as pubs or anything, fire it in there.
Yes.
So we got people going wide there. We got Jane from Shropshire. We got Wendy from you know Wendy.
Hi Wendy. Hi, nice to see you again. Oh, Sandy, hello. Emma Sylvester, nice
it's going
to
a little
meet
bit
you.
fast now.
Fantastic. Where are these people from?
Leicester.
Shropshire again. Worcestershire. I don't know.
Cornwall. I was born in Cornwall, so I love Cornwall.
I've got Cornwall roots.
And Bucks.
Mike from Nunthorpe. Well done. Hello. Oh, Nikki from Corfmullen. Hello. We're going to talk about her today. Yes, keep popping it in because we just love hearing from you. And it's not just John and I because we're trying to focus on the camera and what we need to say and the chat. We do have our lovely team behind the screen. So, shall we get this event started?
Yeah, let's do it. So you're going to go over and introduce our first speaker.
Yes,
see you later, Mel.
We are. Okay, so our first speaker this morning is Councillor Sue Baxter. She is the chairman of NELC and she was elected as the first female chair in December 2016. She believes that local people understand the needs of areas best and by making decisions about services that they value because they're close to it. They can build stronger and thriving communities. So good morning, Councillor Sue Baxter.
Good morning, everyone. And thank you for inviting me to be a part of Scribefest 2021. It's a great privilege to be chair of NALC. And as I come to the end of my term, together we stand is a phrase that keeps coming to mind as I reflect on those recent years. And I believe it'll also be the key to our continued success moving forward and the challenges that we're sure to face. As I look back, I know I can never thank you enough for everything that you do to make a difference to our communities. We've had a challenging 18 months, and the support that you've given your communities, vulnerable residents and local business has been demonstrated and told over and over again. So I'm going to thank you again. Thank you, everyone, for what you've done for your local communities over recent years. We all want the same thing, whether we're councillors, clerks, county associations or NALC. We're all passionate about making a difference, passionate about making life better for our communities. We're the voice for our communities. We're truly local and deliver the things that they need, want and deserve. True parish power in action. There's no end game though, just a mission to continue to make a difference, to adapt to change and to continue to make life better for our communities. When I look back and reflect on when I first stood for election as a parish councillor, I stood because I thought I could make a change. I got involved in my county association in NALC because I wanted to make a change. It was a real privilege and honour to be elected chair of NALC, the first ever female chair, and I'm proud of being elected, but I'm not particularly proud that I'm the first female chair, and I'm absolutely sure that I won't be the last, so come on all you ladies. There's a golden thread though that goes all the way from my roots within the local community, through my county association to NALC and beyond, which allows me to draw on my experiences. And I still get those goosebump moments when something happens that brings me back to those roots and why I believe that what we do as parish councils is so brilliant. Little things that mean a lot to people. Last week, we opened our community allotments and I saw the effort put in by our councillors, volunteers, and the support from our local businesses, and the smiles of appreciation on our residents who will enjoy the facility. That was one of those goosebump moments. And as I look back, the very heart of my work has been engaging with our members, being visible and honest, regularly communicating through my open letters. Lobbying. This is a key part of being NALC chair, and I'm really proud that we've been able to deliver these achievements. The multi-year deal on referendum principles. It's absolutely right that local councils engage with their communities and have the freedom to raise the precept to deliver the services that their community wants. Gdpr. Our lobbying to remove the need for parish and town councils to have a data protection officer was a hard-fought battle, which we won and which has saved the sector millions of pounds. Toilet tax, universal support, but took a little while to get the change in legislation through. Again, millions of pounds saved, and really importantly, the springboard for other community assets to be exempt from business rates in the future. Having an effective standards regime is really important, and we were successful in lobbying the Committee on Standards in Public Life to agree the need for sanctions and to include these in their recommendations. While we were able to influence the report, government has not yet responded, despite continuous lobbying by ourselves and by others. I'm also immensely proud that our councils are tackling some of the big challenges facing our communities. Picture at the bottom right-hand side here, our report on the work of local councils helping tackle dementia was presented to the Prime Minister in Downing Street. So, looking at my role within the business, a big part of my role is the leadership of the organisation. And I'm really lucky in that my predecessors, and particularly my past chairman, Ken Browse, built solid foundations and a great team at all levels. This allowed me to instigate a review of our strategic direction, our big conversation on the future of the sector. And this resulted in a new focus on member services, with a new team, with enhanced services and partnerships at the very heart of it. Over these 5 years, we've worked really hard to strengthen the relationship with our county associations. And over the last 18 months, Zoom has certainly helped us overcome our geographical challenges with frequent and regular meetings between NALC and county association staff. Of course, we continue to have sound and robust finances. So now, I want to talk about the future and the challenges that I believe our sector will be facing. And I truly believe that we must stand together, for divided we will fall. Lobbying. But lobbying isn't just in Parliament. Clerks, councils, councillors, all fundamental to lobbying our MPs. Ministers listen to us, but they also listen to their fellow MPs, and pressure from those MPs is absolutely critical. We need to stand together and lobby together to get the results that we want. Some things are outside of our control, but we need to influence them. Planning reform, making sure that communities still do have an input through the plan making process, and in particular through neighbourhood planning and strengthening the neighbourhood development plans. There are already 1,000 neighbourhood development plans in place, over 100,000 signatures on local referendums. Local government reform, devolution and levelling up. What do we want? And what are we prepared to change to get what we want? We need investment, support to build our capacity and capability, not just investment from government, but investment from other sources. But importantly, we also need to invest. We need to invest in ourselves, our partners, our communities, making the best of our sense of neighbourliness, people and place at our heart. We need to stand together to get the investment in our sector and to invest in our sector. Underpinning all of this is good governance. Civility, respect, and that highest level of governance. While we were successful with the Committee on Standards in Public Life, the recommendations, we are hugely frustrated with the lack of response from government. Meanwhile, we need to do something. We're working together with the SLCC and our county associations to find ways that we can improve standards of behaviour. We've signed off financial support. We've just taken on a project manager to pull together a plan of action that we hope to be able to put in place over the coming months. I believe that it's absolutely key that we all stand together to meet all of these challenges, for I fear that divided we will fall. So what do we need to do? We need to make a change. Let's build on the good things that we're doing, build on them and develop them for the benefit of our communities. Let's encourage more people to get involved, to bring a fresh approach and ambition to the community, council and to our sector. Let's make sure that our clerks' profession is recognised and our clerks are equipped with the skills and capabilities to deliver for their communities. Thank you very much for listening, and I'm more than happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Sue Baxter. That was extremely helpful and insightful. Let's have a look at the chat. Are there any questions? Please pop them in the chat box now. Great. Councillor Baxter, can I ask you just to stop sharing your screen? Otherwise, we can't really see your face very well.
Thank you, Pal.
That's absolutely fine. So if you wiggle your mouse at the top, it should have a little red thing that says stop sharing. Yes, thank you ever so much. Thank you. Brilliant. So I'm also joined on the sofa here by someone that joined the Scribe team very recently. Her name is Jo Peters. Jo has been a clerk for 15 years and she's also SILCA qualified, so a huge asset to the team. So Jo, we're going to ask some questions.
Hello everybody. I have a question from Wendy. Is there any news on allowing parish councils to hold meetings remotely following the court ruling on the 7th of May and call for evidence, please, Sue?
Thank you. This is something that we continuously lobby on. Also the LGA, the Local Government Association, they're lobbying on it as well. I've mentioned it when I've spoken to Luke Hall, the previous Minister for Local Government. There was a consultation, which I'm sure we've all responded to, but as yet there's no news. There are rumours. There are rumours that perhaps in the future we may be allowed to have hybrid meetings. It's fair to say that I think it's a long way down the government's agenda at the moment, but it's something that we've just all got to keep pushing for. And as I mentioned earlier on about lobbying, I can lobby from the centre, we can do that from NALC, but the more pressure that we can put on from you guys, lobbying your MPs and putting that pressure on from there will help. But sadly, at this point in time, no news.
Okay, thanks ever so much for that, Sue. Another question, which is from Sue actually, is why is it taking so long to get Clark's new pay deal, which was due on the 1st of April 2021? Is there any news on that, Sue, please?
I'm sorry, I would have to get back to you on that. I'm not sure where we are. No, I'd need to get back to you with that. If that's okay, guys.
No, that's absolutely fine. Yvonne just wants to say thank you for calling out the actions being taken to improve behaviour, value our clerks and build on what we are doing well. This is a huge support on what we are doing within our council to increase the sense of belonging and collaboration. Your slide and comments can be well used in this local exercise, having heard your comments today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jo. Thank you so much. Thank you, Councillor Sue Baxter. We have one last question that's been emailed in advance, if you don't mind, please. It is about the gov.uk website that apparently you cannot search on your postcode. When you search for your local council, it actually brings up your district or your county council, and the parish and town councils would very much like for it to bring their details up. Can they ask for NELC's support in this regard?
That's certainly something that I will take forward. It's something that I was made aware of a little while ago as well, and that we are looking into at the moment. But yeah, no, I agree that where we have a parish council, we should certainly be able to know who is our parish council.
Absolutely.
Our parish councillor.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Sue, I know this is a bit of a left field one. We have a playlist at lunchtime where we're playing everybody's favourite music, and I guess this is going to be interesting. do you have a favourite song at all that we could add to their Spotify playlist?
Oh, Kirsty MacColl,
Yes?
and I can't remember the name of it.
Kirsty MacColl. We will find it, we will get it on. And thank you again for making the time.
Thank you for,
joining us.
Kirsty MacColl, thank you for the...
Thank you for the...
something.
We will find it. I can see Jess nodding, she's found it already, so that's brilliant. Thank you very much, Councillor Baxter. We hope you have a lovely day.
And thank you again for inviting me.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Right, over to John.
Hi, so I'm joined here with Alex Saunders from Lees Prior. He's a partner at Lees and he's going to be talking about GDPR. Alex is a bit of an expert on GDPR. He helps us out a lot with it, our company. And I mean, you blog about agile software development and the legal side of that and all kinds of things. So Alex, question for you. What's your biggest win in the last year?
Biggest win? It's a good question. Well, it's good to stay positive in a year of arguably quite a few negatives. But my biggest win personally was I was promoted to partner, so that's quite an easy one.
Congratulations!
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Oh,
so no,
yeah.
that was really I'd known about it for a while, but because of everything that was happening, it was being postponed, and then it was announced May this year. So that's great news.
Cool. And anything else in your personal life?
Also, just moved house.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Sweet.
So just taking
Upgrade.
quite a lot at the moment.
So you got the partner, you got the bigger money, and then
those two things weren't necessarily linked. We had already started moving, but
right,
yeah, there's quite a lot going on.
All right. Well, so I'll hand it over to you here. Give your presentation. You're all set up.
Perfect.
Alex,
Thanks,
we'll
John.
have some questions after.
Lovely. Morning, everyone. Well, firstly, I just say I'm delighted to be talking here at Scribefest today. My name, as John said, my name is Alex Saunders. I'm a partner in a firm called Lees Prior, who are based in Norwich, in the Cathedral Close in Norwich. And for my sins, amongst other things, I specialise in data protection. So please don't judge me too much on that. I do other things, but one of the things I do is data protection. And what I'm going to be talking to you today about is the GDPR and 5 common myths. And we'll be looking to debunk those myths as much as possible. So, whilst the GDPR has been around now for getting on for 3.5 years, there is still a huge amount of confusion and misinformation that's out there. And what I'm hoping to do for you today is to navigate through some of that confusion and give you a clear and hopefully pragmatic guide as to what you can and can't do. So the GDPR, I mean, who remembers that? It feels like a lot has happened since, but it's certainly something that's still relevant. And if you cast your minds back to 2018, when the GDPR first came into force, it was, really was the hot topic of the time. I remember my local newspaper running with the headline, "Is GDPR bigger than Brexit?" And whilst in today's world that seems absolutely ludicrous, at the time it gives you a bit of a flavour as to just how hyped the legislation was, and to an extent what sort of scaremongering there was. So in view of that, there is a lot of misinformation. I'm going to be looking to dispel and clarify that as much as I possibly can. So, GDPR. Unless you've been living under a rock for the last 3.5 years, you'll have probably at least heard the term. So I'm just going to give a very brief intro. When I'm talking about the UK GDPR, which you'll see on the slides, that is the correct version. All it means, it's exactly the same thing, it's just the same as the GDPR, same legislation, just the UK version. Came into force, as I mentioned, on the 25th of May 2018. Most importantly, it governs the use of personal data. So when I'm talking about personal data, I'm talking about anything that identifies an individual. So that could be a name, an email address, a telephone number, even an IP address is personal data. But company information, so anything about a corporate body, isn't. And sort of what might be relevant for some of you at the conference today is that, and rather morbidly for a Wednesday, information relating to the deceased actually isn't applicable. So if you're administering things like cemeteries, for example, if you've got records relating to that, that falls outside of the scope of the GDPR. It applies to all organisations in the UK and those non-UK organisations that are offering goods and services in the UK, so it's going to be applicable to pretty much everyone, I suspect, at the conference. And it's enforced in the UK by the Information Commissioner's Office, the ICO, who sort of have taken initially the role of pantomime villain in a lot of this, but actually are now trying to position themselves as a force for sort of positive change, which remains to be seen. And as for Brexit, one of the many things that's happened or at least been implemented since 2018. I often get clients come to me and say, Alex, does Brexit mean that GDPR is no longer applicable? At which point I would love to say, yeah, let's just all crack on with our days, but in actual fact, Brexit's made no difference. The GDPR still applies, it's just been incorporated into UK law. But watch this space. There are increasing murmurs that the UK government want to move away from the GDPR. So whilst I think in the short to medium term it's going to be around, there is a possibility that in the longer term we might move away to something slightly less onerous. So, let's get into a bit of myth busting. So the first myth is that consent is always necessary, that you need to get permission in every scenario where you're collecting or using someone's personal information. And as you'll start to see a bit of a pattern with this talk. That's not true. Very much a myth, very much a piece of misinformation. In actual fact, consent is only one way to comply with the GDPR, and that there are lots and lots of other ways to comply, and in many ways consent is sort of one of the less favourable ways to use personal information. So as my first take-home message, you don't always need to get consent, you don't always need to get permission in order to use and collect personal information. So as you can see there, consent is one of 6 lawful bases on which you can use personal information. When you're using personal information, you always need to go back to one of these 6 grounds, which I'll talk to you about in a moment. Consent is one of them, but there are 5 others. And the reason that I sort of say that the GDPR and consent under the GDPR isn't particularly favourable is because it's a very high standard. It needs to be informed, it needs to be specific, it needs to be unambiguous, it needs to be freely given, and it needs to be given by some kind of positive step. So there are lots and lots of boxes that need to be ticked as part of that. And the most important one is that this point around kind of being freely given, that consent means, kind of genuinely does mean having real choice and control. And what I mean by that in practice is, for example, you can't get consent where there's an imbalance of, or it's difficult to get consent where there's an imbalance of bargaining power. So, for example, it's difficult to get consent from employees because those employees aren't really able to say no, or if they do, they might suffer some kind of, some kind of unfavourable treatment. So that makes it more difficult. Also, you can't bundle in consent with other things. So when we're instructed at least prior, a client will enter into an engagement letter and we'll say, right, we're doing X, Y, and Z for you. What we can't say within that engagement letter is, oh, and by the way, we're going to add you to our marketing list and we're going to be, sending you emails every day. So it's not, you can't bundle those 2 things together because obviously you can't separate out the service from the marketing, and therefore you can't freely give consent. So consent is really only appropriate where other grounds don't apply, and you're not going to be, in 95% of cases, you're not going to be wanting to get permission to use personal information. As we'll see shortly, you'll have other grounds on which to use that personal information. And the one final thing worth mentioning is that consent can be withdrawn at any time. So if someone gives their consent, they can take it away just as easily. So it doesn't give you any sort of indefinite or long-standing ability to use that person's personal information. And in a recently coined phrase, if someone withdraws their consent, you have no authority to use that personal information. So let's talk about what some of the other grounds are in order for you to use personal information, and probably the ones you're going to be relying on in practice. So firstly, if you've got a contract with an individual and you need to use personal information under that contract, then you're entitled to do so without consent. Easy. So a good example of this would be an employment contract. If you've got employees and you need to pay them, you need to carry out performance reviews, you need to speak to them on a day-to-day basis, then you don't have to get consent. You can just rely on the contract that you have with them. And obviously, it's going to be very difficult to rely on consent in that scenario anyway. This one's going to be really relevant for local councillors. If you're carrying out some kind of public task that's laid down by law, or if you are doing something in the public interest, then you can rely on a specific ground, which is that you're carrying out that using the personal information is necessary to carry out a public task. So that one's going to be, I suspect, in sort of 80–90% of the occasions you're using personal information, that's going to be the relevant one. And then finally, you've got this concept of legitimate interests, which you may have heard of before. So where you are, where you can't sort of peg your use of personal information to any other ground that we've talked about, then you can potentially rely on having a legitimate interest. And what ultimately a legitimate interest means is that you have a genuine reason to use that information, and that the privacy impact on the individual affected is not going to be doesn't override your own legitimate interest. So to give you an example of that, CCTV cameras are a really good example of where you'd rely on a legitimate interest. You've got a legitimate interest, which is the health and safety of people, and also the safety of property as well. And clearly there's not going to be any other ground that's going to be appropriate. You're not going to have someone walking around with a clipboard, getting someone's consent every time, ticking off names. You're not necessarily going to have a contract with those individuals. For example, if it's in a car park, you might just have random people wandering on. It's not necessary for carrying out a public task. So you're probably going to be looking at having a legitimate interest. Against that, if you were to put CCTV cameras in an area that's obviously meant to be private, your legitimate interest is probably going to be overridden by that person's privacy impact. So if you start putting cameras in toilets or other areas that are obviously intended to be private, then clearly the privacy impact on the individual is going to override your own legitimate interest. And just for the record, I definitely don't recommend putting cameras in toilets. So, second myth is around data breaches. So again, there's loads and loads of confusion around this and what you need to do, what a data breach is. So I'm going to try and clear that up in a sort of simpler way as possible, because all organisations will come across data breaches from time to time. So the myth is that all breaches need to be reported in every single instance. And it probably won't surprise you when I say that that is not true. A data breach only needs to be reported where there is risk to the individual involved. So there's no risk to the individual whose data has been breached, then you don't need to report it. So if we just quickly pause there and talk about what a data breach actually is. Well, it's effectively any unlawful or wrong or misuse of someone's personal information. It can be anything from a large-scale hack that brings the entire network down, through to leaving documents on a train, through to sending an innocuous email to the wrong person that's got personal information in it. So a data breach is really, really widely defined. And you do, in some situations, need to report. So there's kind of two reporting lines, really, that you need to bear in mind. One is to the ICO, so to the regulator in this sector, and one is to the affected individuals, who are sort of technically called referred to as the data subjects. So where you need to report to the ICO, you need to do so without undue delay, and in any event within 72 hours of discovering the breach. That is a hard stop. That is something that you need to comply with. But crucially, you don't need to report the breach if there is no risk to the individuals involved. And what I mean by that is that their rights and freedoms are not going to be adversely affected by the breach. So you'd be looking at this, and this is ultimately a question of fact, and it's a real judgment call. So you would have, you need to consider things like who the affected individuals are, how much data is involved, what the nature of the information is. So if it's kind of sensitive, if it's health records, things like that. You need to consider who the recipient is. You need to consider whether or not it's confidential. All of those things are going to form a judgment as to whether or not you are going to need to report that breach. But if you send, for example, an innocuous email that contains someone else's information by accident, the likelihood is you're not going to need to report that breach. So it's not an absolute requirement. On the flip side, if you sent payroll records to the wrong person that had information about salary or had information about when someone was off sick, then you probably would need to consider reporting at that stage, but it's not an absolute requirement. On the flip side, you may also need to tell the affected individuals themselves. To do that, you need to just do it without undue delay. But crucially here, the bar is much higher. It's actually, you only need to report if there is a high risk to the individuals involved. So the bar is taken up, and that's for obvious reasons, because it's much more difficult, potentially, to go around and tell all of those affected individuals that there's been a data breach. That can take a lot of time, depending on how many people they're involved. It can be quite a big exercise. So really, you only need to tell affected individuals whose data has been breached in probably the more serious or the most serious of cases. So actually, the position under the GDPR is quite favourable. And if you get it wrong, then, as we'll talk about in a moment, you're not necessarily going to be slapped with some massive fine. The likelihood is that the ICO will get in touch. They will ask you to give you reasons. They might ask you to sort of include sort of policies and procedures to make sure it doesn't happen again. So the second takeaway on that point is that not all data breaches need to be reported. So, thirdly, I'm going to be talking about data protection officers. Again, this is a really a big area of confusion with the GDPR, and I think it's particularly relevant for local councils as well. So when I was doing a lot of these talks sort of in 2018, 2019, I'd often talk alongside someone who was sort of trying to sell data protection services. And as a result, what you found was that a load of organisations had data protection officers when they actually didn't need them. So the myth is very much that all organisations need a DPO. The reality is far different. Organisations only need a DPO in specific and quite limited circumstances. So a data protection officer only needs to be appointed if you're a public body or authority, and obviously that's going to be really relevant for those at this conference, so I'll come back to that shortly. 2, you need to appoint a data protection officer if you are using sensitive personal data on a large scale, which I suspect for most organisations is going to be pretty unlikely. You also need to appoint a data protection officer if you're monitoring areas on a large scale, so I don't know, CCTV in a large shopping centre or something like that, or monitoring online activity. But crucially, that bottom point there, which is that parish councils don't need to appoint a data protection officer unless they're using large-scale sensitive personal data or they're monitoring large-scale public areas. So that's really, and I did a bit of a straw poll before I wandered over to Scribe's offices, and I had a quick look to see how many parish councils had appointed data protection officers when they actually didn't need one, and the results were overwhelmingly high actually. There were quite a few that had appointed DPOs when they didn't need them. So if you're a parish councillor sat there and thinking, do you know what, it's made my life, it's given me a bit of a headache appointing a DPO, the reality is you actually don't need to. If you're a larger city or district council, then you would need to, because you'd fall under the grounds of 1. So, myth number 4 that we're going to get rid of here is that there's an absolute right to be forgotten. So, right to be forgotten was one of the big things that came in under the GDPR. It effectively means that an individual can get in touch and say, I'd like you to delete all of my information that you're holding on me. And there's, again, as with so many of these things that we've talked about so far, there is some real confusion. And what you had is organisations, even though they still needed the information, were just deleting it because they thought, oh no, we don't want to get fined by the ICO. There must be an absolute right. But that's not the case. Individuals only have the right to request that their information is deleted in specific situations, and quite limited situations. So as you can see throughout all of this, it's much more nuanced than these kind of absolute rights. Than, it's not necessarily absolute, not necessarily black and white. So individuals can only have their data deleted, firstly, where the information is actually not needed by your organisation. So if you still need that information, you're entitled to keep it. And if someone gets in touch with you to say, I want you to delete everything that you're holding on me, but you have a genuine reason for still holding on to it, then in most cases, you can do exactly that. You can, individuals have the right to have their data deleted where consent was given, so the reason you're using it is because you've got their permission to use it to start with. Going back to what we first talked about, my view is that you should not really be collecting consent unless you absolutely need to. So get where you've got consent and then it's been subsequently withdrawn, then at that point that individual can ask you to delete everything that you're holding on them. Also, they can personal information can be deleted where it's needed to be deleted under some UK law, so health records, that sort of thing. But in most scenarios, what you'll find is that you don't need to comply with that. I mean, we get it at Leeds Prior all the time. We often get individuals who are doing a bit of a data cleanse turning around to us and saying, we'd like you to delete everything you're holding on us, and we want you to do it now. And we will always say, unfortunately, we can't, because we have a reason to keep that data. In our case, it's sort of anti-money laundering regulations and that sort of thing. But we have a reason to keep hold of it. So it's not an absolute right to be forgotten. And if you're getting a lot of people asking you to delete the information you hold on them, then you don't have to unless one of these grounds applies. And then finally, my last myth that we're going to dispel is in relation to fines. So this was the big sort of headline that came out from the GDPR back in May 2018. And the headline at the time was this: GDPR is all about the big fines. The ICO are after all small, medium-sized businesses, and they're going to whack them with these humongous fines. And that just simply isn't true. There have been very few fines issued by the ICO in the UK under the GDPR. The ICO can issue big fines. They do have the power to issue those big fines. As you'll see there, up to 4% of global turnover or 17.5 million, whichever is the greater. But there have been very few fines over the last 3.5 years. There's really only been, there's about 50 in total, and in the UK that is, and those fines have generally been fairly small, sometimes for kind of fairly sort of minor and technical things. So whilst the ICO has that ability to fine, they've made it very, very clear that that's not their intention, and actually they want to remedy some of these. They want people to remedy the issues first before going down the sanctions route. So that's everything from me on the myths, dispelling some of those key myths under the GDPR. Thanks very much for listening. As a final thought, I think the GDPR is, when it first came out, it was seen as very onerous. It was seen as a real sort of layer of compliance that a lot of organisations didn't need. But what we're finding more increasingly is that the GDPR, when you can navigate your way through that misinformation, what we're finding is that the GDPR in actual fact can be a really good way to help engage with local communities, or in businesses' case, engage with their customers and build up that trust by taking data protection seriously. So thanks very much for listening. And I see John in the background, so I suspect we'll take a few questions.
Thanks, Alex. Everyone give him a round of applause. I want to see you doing it back at home. Please do that. Really good talk. Didn't realise all the nuances there. So we've got a lot of questions.
A lot of questions.
It's been going wild, the Zoom.
Oh, good. Okay.
So we've got 15 minutes. So we'll Jess, do you want to come on? Yeah. Jess is going to share some of the questions that we've got from the audience.
Okay.
So the first question is, if you're a small parish council but run a cemetery, is a data protection officer necessary?
No.
No?
There you go. That is probably the most clear-cut answer I suspect you would get from a lawyer, because parish councils, really, really clear in the legislation that parish councils are excluded from needing a data protection officer. And if you're running a cemetery in Unessa, you're doing something completely out of the usual in terms of what information you're using, and if you're running a small cemetery, then no, you are all good on that front.
Perfect. Okay, and we have a question from Lisa. So can groups working on behalf of the parish council share contact lists? We have separate arm's length NDP and climate groups who would like to share our central contact list.
Okay, so you can share contact lists if you have, when we talked about one of those reasons, if you have one of those reasons to do so, and that you can ensure that the person receiving those contact lists is going to give the same level of protection that you're giving to that information. So you would need to probably rely on the fact that you've got a legitimate interest to share that list, unless you can say that it's necessary to carry out a public task. But if you've got a legitimate interest, and as long as those lists aren't particularly intrusive or particularly private or don't have particularly sensitive information, I suspect you'd be able to rely on having a legitimate interest. And in those circumstances, as I say, you would want to make sure that the recipient of those lists has given you assurances that they're going to apply the same level of security. So the practical steps is you could ask to see a data protection policy of theirs, you could ask them to enter into a sort of short data sharing contract or some kind of data sharing sort of memorandum of understanding or something along those lines. There's a number of practical steps that you can take on that front, but it's certainly not an absolute no. As you'll probably have seen from some of the things I was talking about, a lot of this stuff is quite nuanced, and it will depend on what data is involved, because that's going to be really determinative. But it certainly doesn't sound like an absolute no, and I suspect there would be grounds to be able to do that.
Perfect. Okay, and another one from Aaron. Do you have to destroy old register of electors once you receive a new one?
That's an interesting question. So the big thing, and I haven't sort of touched upon it absolutely during this talk, but it's a question I get asked quite a lot, which is when you need to destroy or delete personal information depends on whether or not you still need it. So if your organisation, Aaron, still needs the information for whatever reason, whether that's under law or that's for some other reason, then generally speaking you can keep it. What you can't do is keep it for any longer than you need to. So there is no set, unless there's any specific law that applies in this situation, there is generally not any set guidelines that have been put forth by the ICO to say you need to delete it within X number of years. So what we find is that organisations come up with their own policy on how long they want to keep things for, sort of coming up with their own retention policy, and then following that. And if you can justify why you still need to keep something, it's going to be very, very difficult for anyone else to come along, whether that's the ICO or anyone else, and say that your own policy is wrong, because you know your organisation far better than they do. So it's about coming up with your own policy for how long you keep things, and the key thing is, the real take home is, you can't keep the information for any longer than you need it. So if you don't need it anymore, yes, you should be deleting it. If you still need it for a genuine reason, then you can keep it.
Perfect. Okay, and do we have time for a couple more
Yeah,
questions?
we're good.
Yeah.
We've still got 10 minutes. Yeah.
Okay, so
sure.
one from Sue. When sending emails to councillors only, should you use BCC?
It's good practice. It's good practice to do that. I wouldn't necessarily say that you're going to automatically have a breach, because there may be reason. It may be that information is available more widely anyway.
Yeah, I always hear that. I've seen people make the error of not doing BCC, and everyone's freaking out. This is a Gdpr breach.
Yeah, it's very relevant at the moment, because I don't know if you might have seen the news. The MOD released they sent an email to about 150 Afghan refugees, but didn't BCC.
Oh.
That is a situation where you obviously need to include them in BCC, and didn't, and therefore obviously their information became their email addresses and their names, and I think in some cases their profile pictures became known beyond, within the 250
so
people on that list. Clear breach.
Yeah.
The MOD have reported it to the ICO, as you would expect, and that's probably one that will be considered in the very serious category, just because of the nature of it. So this is when talking about the GDPR being quite nuanced, and I know that sounds like a little bit of a lawyer's answer, it's because it really is, because in that situation, absolute slam dunk breach.
So the opposite, if you're promoting an event in your parish and you accidentally include everyone on your and it's just like a fate or something, that's
it is still a breach because you've used that information in a way that you shouldn't have done, but it comes back to, is it a reportable breach? Now, in that situation, I would probably be, if I was advising a client, be minded to say, okay, I think we should probably be reporting here, because, and it would depend on how many people, you know, what the reaction was, and that sounds like a bit of an odd thing to say, but if the reaction is you get loads and loads of people emailing back, and the worst thing is that when then obviously people email back and reply to all, so you've then got this kind of constant trail. At that point, I think to be on the safe side, you would probably want to report, but I think if push came to shove, you may be able to get away without it.
If it's like 20 people, no one mentions it, and they probly know each other anyway.
But I think as a matter of good practice, put everyone on BCC, and then you just avoid that issue altogether. No, you're absolutely right.
Perfect. And I think that answers Amanda's question as well, who asked whether it needs reporting to ICO every time.
So not every time. Reporting to the ICO is actually not that difficult. So sometimes I say to clients, and it depends on what their appetite to risk is and how much or otherwise they want the hassle, but I say a lot to clients, you know, we might as well, because a report to the ICO takes probably about 20-30 minutes if it's just a pretty simple breach like we just talked about. And the reality is that the ICO will come back, unless it's very serious, normally they just sort of come back and say, yeah, we've got it, and you never hear anything from it again. So sometimes, although you know, as a matter of law, you don't always need to report a breach, sometimes it's easier just to do it. It's very easy to do by email or the portal.
Perfect. Okay, and one from Rebecca. Would there be any issue with giving access to our CCTV to our police force? So not just sharing the data, but giving them full access to view all the cameras?
That's an interesting one. So if it's in relation to a crime and they've asked for specific footage at a specific time, then you are fine. If they want a sort of an ongoing feed, then that might need some sort of further consideration. But generally speaking, where it's a direct request that comes from the police force and it's in relation to preventing or detecting a crime, then on most scenarios you're on the right side.
Yeah. Okay. And one from Alison, who said, we had a request for information but not a formal one. Should this be treated the same as an FOI? We did treat it this way, but just wondered for future.
Yeah, so I suppose there's two things to mention here. The first is we've got two distinctions: subject access request and a Freedom of Information Act request. So two slightly different things, but there'll be a fair amount of overlap. So a subject access request is a request from an individual to say, I would like you to give me my personal information. Any individual can do it with any organisation. It is one of the most irritating things for my sort of business clients, because anyone can do it and it's now free. It used to cost a tenner, it's now free, so no one actually even has to pay. All they need to do is provide their ID. So in that situation, there is no formality required, and the individual making the request can just write to you. With Freedom of Information Act requests, likewise, there's no sort of formal forms in quite the same way. So ultimately, if someone has requested that information and you need to, and the really crucial thing probably for Alison to consider there is not whether or not the request has been made validly, but probably, do I need to respond to it? Because with the Freedom of Information Act, there are probably more exemptions than there are reasons to disclose. With the Gdpr and subject access requests, less so, but there are still a number of ways that you might not have to respond to it. So I think that for me would be probably the biggest focus. There tend to be, with the actual requests themselves, there are not a huge number of formalities made. You know, for example, if you're making a subject access request, you don't have to say, you don't even have to say this is a subject access request under section da-da-da-da of the GDPR. You just need to say, can I have my data, please?
Yeah, perfect.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah,
That's
so
a wrap.
any other questions, will they be able to be answered
so
later?
what I suggest is, I don't want to put you on the spot here, but we also have something called the Scribe Academy, where we do webinars throughout the month. Do you want to come in? Yeah, we've been told to move. A bit of choreography. Yes, we have a thing called Scribe Academy where we do webinars for our customers, but anyone, we do public ones. And this seems such a hot topic with the Freedom of Information Act. And would you, if we could find a mutual time, invite you back to maybe do like a Q&A session and a bit? Would you be up for that?
Yeah, I'd be delighted to.
Cool. So if any of you guys really want to hear more from Alex, just drop yes in the Zoom chat and we'll get him back, because this seems to be a hot topic for you guys. Final question with the Spotify playlist.
Ooh. And
I know you're a hardcore muso.
I am
What
indeed.
instruments do you play?
I'll have a go at most things, but my main instrument is guitar.
Okay, because you toured Europe, didn't you?
I did, bits and pieces.
Good. I like hearing all those stories. Yeah, so what is your favourite song that we can add to the playlist?
My favourite song, and that's such a difficult question. But Joe, with this lovely view over Norwich that we've got behind us, and with the sun shining in the background, I think "Here Comes the Sun" by the Beatles.
Oh, good.
From the seminal album Abbey Road, which is one of my favourites. I've been fortunate enough to go to Abbey Road as well.
Oh, right, sweet.
So I think given the day and given the occasion, I think that's the
Shall
one.
we get you to perform it at Scribe Academy?
I don't think, I'm absolutely certain that no one wants to hear that.
I'm sure they do. All right, cool. Thanks for your time, Alex. Really appreciate it. So we're now going to hand over to Mal on the couch, and she's going to introduce our next speaker.
Hello everybody, I can see that many of you are commenting how much you've enjoyed Alex's session. That's good to know. We've also had, just on housekeeping, we've had a couple of questions about whether you will be receiving a copy of the presentation after the session. The answer is yes, we can get that to you, but also just so that everybody knows, we are recording the whole event today. So you are also, as you've registered, you will receive a copy of it. So you're welcome to revisit the information. Right. So, the next session we have James McCleary, who is a co-director at Breakthrough Communication, and they specialise in media training and compliance in the local government sector. And today he will be talking to us about how you can use social media to engage your community. Welcome here at Scribefest, James.
Hi, thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.
Yes, brilliant. Would you say that the landscape for how people consume information has changed significantly over the last few years?
Yeah, and I think it's been accelerated by the impact of lockdown and the COVID-19 pandemic, which has seen more and more people using digital means to access data, particularly in the local government sector.
Fantastic. Well, I'll tell you what, over to you, and when you're done, we have a poll for everybody, and we'll get one of our support team back to talk to us about that. Thank you, James.
Wonderful, thanks a lot. So I'm just going to share some slides very quickly. I've not got a lot of them to go through, but I thought I'd just have a couple of visual prompts. Just for context for everybody, in case you don't know me, my name is James McCleary. I am a director of Breakthrough Communications. I have sort of 10, 15 years experience sort of delivering national communication strategies. And also I'm a local councillor, I'm a town councillor where I live. So hopefully lots of applicable experience. And we're going to talk today very briefly sort of about how to use social media to engage your community. I've picked out some sort of key points that I think are useful on these slides, and I hope that we'll go through them. And at the end, I'm very happy to take a few questions if we've got time, but I'm conscious that time is short, so I will not labour too many points for too long. Most of these slides are taken out of training sessions that we do with county associations across the country, and some of you may have attended some of our sessions. So it's sort of worth pointing out that each of these slides probably represents a 2-hour session on its own. So there's quite a lot of information here to get through. So starting out, how councils benefit from social media. And I'm sure that some of you, or probably most of you, are already making use of social media, whether that's simply using something like Facebook, or whether you're using a range of platforms to communicate with your community. But social media, as the question showed, has grown enormously in its relevance to our sector in the last couple of years. And as I said, that's been accelerated by the pandemic. And we've certainly found as a business to provide support in this area that demand has increased, and the use of virtual platforms like this one has made it a lot easier to provide that kind of training and expert support to people. But increasingly, we're seeing residents access their services digitally, and also an expectation that information and signposting is available via social media. And social media presents a huge number of opportunities for councils and councillors to to connect better with their communities. It allows them to reach out and engage with residents across many age groups, especially the harder to reach residents who may not otherwise engage with councils or councillors. And we see this particularly when we're talking about younger age groups and more deprived communities who are very unlikely to engage directly in something like a formal meeting, for instance. So it's a very good way of broadening your reach within the community. It's an opportunity to be a listening ear to your community, listening to local concerns, issues, what's being talked about on social media, what people are saying, what people are interested in. A very good way of getting an idea of the landscape locally and getting outside perhaps the bubble that sometimes forms within our councils when we talk to each other and we think we know what the priorities are. Actually, it can be social media is a good way of sometimes finding that residents have different priorities in different areas. It's a really good way of reporting back to residents about issues, the work of the council, and also work that people are doing as councillors or that the council as a corporate body is doing. Reporting back is one of the most important ways of demonstrating value to residents. Obviously, we all have to suffer from the unfortunate situation sometimes where people complain that their council tax is not being well spent and it's not good value for money and the councils don't do anything. And indeed, in fact, reporting back via social media is a particularly good way of pushing back against that misconception that in some way councils are raking in large amounts of money and just sitting on it, which is obviously not true in anyone's case. So it's a very good way of reporting back. It's also a good way of reporting back if you've conducted any sort of outreach to the community, such as a survey, which is something we work with a lot of councils on, doing large-scale annual surveys, neighbourhood plan consultations, or any kind of survey or consultation you've carried out. Vital to report back the findings of that so people know what it said. Keeping in touch with local groups, organisations and businesses. Social media presents a fantastic opportunity to do that because you're able to tag people, you're able to bring people into the discussion. And finally, simply disseminating information from your council and feedback from any questions. Important little note for councillors like me, if you're using social media, you're usually acting in your own capacity as an individual councillor and not formally representing the council. All we mean by that is it's quite often raised with us when we're having these sorts of discussions with councillors and officers. But it's important to say that you've got to be careful to make sure you're showing that you're only representing your own views, not the corporate views of the council if something hasn't yet been agreed at a council meeting. So there are lots of ways that councils can benefit from social media, and indeed councillors as individuals can also make use of social media. And one of the questions we get a lot is, what platforms should I focus on? What should I use as an individual councillor? What should the council use as a corporate body? Because there's a dizzying array of social media platforms out there. They rise and fall at a tremendous rate. However, in this country, there is effectively one dominant platform, which is Facebook. And Facebook, this graph here shows favourite social media platforms of internet users aged 16 to 64. As opposed to user numbers. In terms of user numbers, Facebook would be even further ahead than it is on there. Instagram has grown enormously in recent years, and as I'm sure many of you know, Facebook is actually the owner of Instagram, so it's the same company. Facebook, though, remains the dominant platform in this country. There are others that councils use. A lot of councils make use of Twitter, and sometimes even the odd other one. But the three main ones would be Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And it's important to think of it as less what should I use and more why am I using it? They all do quite different things. Facebook is your all-purpose platform, which is very good for broadcasting and reaching a very large audience. It's also very good for engagement and getting people involved in the council. It does those things very well. Instagram is a image-led, video-led platform, very good for showcasing things and showing off your area or the council, or if you run, if you're an area that has a lot of tourism, it can be extremely useful for that, and also reaching a younger audience. Instagram has a much younger demographic than other platforms. And Twitter has a much smaller audience, but it's much more concentrated. Very good for engaging with stakeholders, very good for engaging with journalists and other community organizations who you can bring into your tweets. So it's important to note that there are lots out there, but we always say to people, start with Facebook. Do Facebook well before you worry about the other ones, because Facebook remains the dominant social media platform in this country. It also remains the platform that has by far the largest reach across all demographics, including age groups, gender, and every other demographic that we have. So content. People say to us, we want to make more use of social media. What platforms should we use? How do we reach more people? With social media, content is king. It's all about what you post on there, because what you're trying to achieve with your content is engagement and to get a conversation going. And in order to do that, you can look at different types of content. We've put 4 types here. There are other kinds of content you can look at, but thinking about your content quite carefully is very important, because on social media, content is king. Providing news and information pieces from your council or local groups, keeping people informed and updated is, if you like, is your bread and butter. This is kind of the stock content that you would expect from a council. It's the sort of thing that you can share into other Facebook groups. So if you have in your town or village a such and such gossip or something or other notice board, then you can share it in there and increase the reach of your posts. You can signpost to your council services and services provided by other organisations. You can ask questions to find out what people are thinking about different issues. And asking questions is one of the best ways of getting people into a discussion. People like being asked things. Facebook has things like a built-in polling mechanism, which allows you to take quick polls of people. Those things tend to get shared quite widely. So asking people questions, trying to get their opinions, is a really good way of engaging people on social media. And sharing content from elsewhere. Local councillors, other local councillors, local councils, local community groups, local MP, whoever it is, sharing content on your own page to make it a kind of a lively place that's a go-to for people. And when we talk about the type of content, there's sort of some key things as well that underpin that in terms of how it looks. It's vital to understand, and I'll run across it very quickly because it gets quite complicated really, but how Facebook and other social media platforms work. They all have an algorithm behind them, and that prioritizes things or deprioritizes them, depending on the type of content. Again, that's why I say content is king. Engaging content that uses imagery, or better still, video, will get prioritized by Facebook. So Facebook will push it up people's feeds. And what that means is if your Facebook page and your council has 500 followers, if you simply put up a text-only post that doesn't get much engagement, it will simply sink like a stone. Very few of your followers will see it. If, on the other hand, you post a video, Facebook will put that in front of a lot more of your followers, meaning a lot more people will see it. And of course, the product of that is more people will engage with it. And the more people engage with it, the more people will see it. It becomes a virtuous circle and it starts to snowball. Facebook's algorithm basically looks for content which people are talking about. And it then says, okay, people are interested in this. I'm going to show it to more people because it's clearly interesting. And of course, that's how you get snowballing of quite negative content as well, because if people put provocative things on, that's going to get a lot of interest. And Facebook's algorithm simply says, lots of people are talking about it. I'm going to put it in front of more people. But it's worth thinking about with your own content, how to make it as engaging as possible so that more people will see it. In terms of bringing your social media to life, there are a few tips that we tend to give to councils across the board. One is be authentic and do what you feel and act the same way as you would in your day-to-day life. People can get very anxious about the way they come across on social media. But being authentic is absolutely crucial. Being yourselves and putting across things that are real and are about what the council actually does. And or if you're doing it in your individual capacity as a councillor, your authentic voice, how you actually sound. Build up a conversation. You're more likely to get comments to respond to, and people appreciate you're engaging them. So building that conversation and ensuring you're responding to things. So that's how you get the conversation going. If somebody replies to one of your posts and doesn't get a response, they'll think that it's gone into the ether and no one noticed it. So it's very important that you acknowledge that, even if it's just to like it quickly with a little thumbs up. That's enough, just to show that someone noticed it. And the more of that you do, the more people think it's worthwhile engaging positively with the content that you post. And as I just said, using images or even better a video to tell a story, even if it's just a generic photo. And there are several generic stock photo sites, free ones out there, which you can use. Images are always better than just text, always, for the reasons I just outlined. Facebook will, and Instagram and Twitter, but particularly Facebook, will always reward you for using imagery or even better video. And video is a particularly key media in the current landscape as all social media evolves. Video is the area that is growing fastest. And when you look across Facebook, when you look at Instagram, when you look at YouTube, these are increasingly video-driven social media, and it's worth thinking about how you might be able to make use of short videos just to illustrate what you're doing. It's always worth thinking about as well from the perspective of people often think that it's difficult to do a video. I'm doing one right now, and every one of you who is using Zoom right now could simply record themselves in the next 5 minutes. It's very easy to do, and that could be uploaded straight onto Facebook. And the beauty of video is that if you have something quite complicated or quite lengthy to explain, rather than putting 1,000 words of text up, actually conveying it verbally means you can get a lot across in, say, 2 minutes. So it's well worth thinking about how you might use video. From a lot of perspectives, it's very valuable. Going back to that authentic voice, people often talk to us as well about, how should I sound? Well, social media is extremely chatty and it's very personal in style. It's kind of up to the council or the councillor in question how they want to come across. Some of the things we would always advise, though, is avoiding what we would call council speak and acronyms that might make your content inaccessible or irrelevant. It's really important because councillors and councils slip into this kind of council speak very, very easily. We use it to each other all the time. We refer to councils by their acronyms. The general public have no idea what you're talking about. And if you start using a lot of acronyms, they will lose interest very quickly because they simply won't know what they stand for and they haven't got time to look them all up. It's crucial not to assume prior knowledge when you're posting. If you're posting about something that's happened at the council, even if it's something that you think a lot of people do know about, you should always post assuming no prior knowledge, because the reality is the majority of people won't know what it's about. And if you post something that people don't understand, they're not going to engage with it, and it's a waste of everybody's time. So 4 things to go away and try today. So if you don't have one already, set up a council Facebook page, like or join local Facebook pages and groups, and where possible do so using your page. Groups don't always let you like using your page, but it's well worth looking at doing it. Try writing a post on your page and sharing it to relevant groups in your community to see how people engage, and share a piece of relevant content on your page from another source, other councillors, councils, MPs, local media, your services and organisations. Those would be our sort of 4 top tips to try straight away if you're not already doing them. And if you need guidance on anything from Facebook, as in how to set up a page, how to set up use video on Facebook, Facebook itself has lots and lots of advice and lots of instructional videos on how to do this. And we would always point people to those. And of course, you can always talk to us. And one final thing, just before I see if there are any questions that people want to ask, and if anyone can hear a crying baby in the background, I do apologise. My 2-year-old's just come home. We do a free social media health check. We've done this with about 100 councils across the country now. It's completely free of charge. You can access it via our website to sign up, and we just review and report on your council's social media, meet with you one-to-one, brief you on what we found. And we found with a lot of people, it allows them to do very simple, quick, free changes to their social media to improve their output. And we find that they've been very valuable. So please do have a look at that. Feel free to sign up. It's entirely free of charge. And I'm happy to pick up any questions if people have them in the 5 minutes we've got left.
Thank you so much for that, James. I would first of all like to ask you a very important question. What is your little one's name in the background?
Sorry, she's called Amelia.
Please don't apologise, it's fine.
She's called Amelia and she's doing 2-year-old stuff at the moment, so she's
really well, that's absolutely fine. Hello, Amelia, and yeah, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us today, James. That's absolutely great. Yes, I would just like to reiterate that James is from Breakthrough Communications. Please feel free to head over to their website. I think if we could find some details, we'll pop that in the chat as well. Now, just before we get to some questions, we really would like our audience to ask you some. There are some good questions coming in already. We are going to have a little go at some of these social media things that we've just learnt, and we're going to pop up a quick poll. So Jess is going to put that in the screen for us, and the question will be, how do you connect with your local community? Is it up yet? Is it there? Yeah, and then you can vote. Feel free to pop your voting. And I know there's not all of the options on there. We've had some interesting talk on the chat about Snapchat for younger people. Yes. Feel free to put in how you communicate. Can we see some of the replies coming through? We can. Brilliant. Great. Shall we give it another minute? Do we need more time for it? Lovely. Okie dokie. Great. So, I've got my wonderful colleague Jo again here with me with her smiley face. Jo, could you read some of your questions to James, please?
Yes, sure. So I have a few questions for you, James. Don't young people use other platforms such as Snapchat?
Yes, they do. The Snapchat has, I'd say, waned in its popularity. The one that, if councils are looking to reach out to young people, the one we would really recommend using is Instagram. Instagram has a huge reach in the under 25 age group, and as you saw from the numbers we showed, is one of the favourite platforms in this country. Some of the other more niche ones like Snapchat, TikTok, some of them are actually very, very small by comparison. So if you're looking at young people and you're looking to reach out to them, a combination of Facebook and Instagram will actually get you a huge amount of reach and reach a lot more young people than something like Snapchat or TikTok would at the moment.
Okay, that's great. And where can councils find how to create a poll on Facebook, please?
So, as I said towards the end, Facebook has a lot of instructional videos itself. So the easiest thing is to ask Facebook. If you've got a Facebook page already, you can just pop in to whatever search engine you use and just look up how to create a poll on Facebook, and it has instructional videos on how to do all these things. Given that myself and my co-director are both councillors ourselves, we're very aware of budgets, so we never charge people for things that you can get for free. So Facebook have a lot of really good instructional videos, but if people are really struggling, they can always get in touch with us directly if they want.
Great. And how can councils engage with those who don't use social media?
Well, there's a lot of ways, and social media should always form part of your overall communications mix. People should never rely on social media alone, because as the questioner rightly alludes to, there are people out there who don't make regular use of social media. So there's a lot of different ways. One of the key ones from a digital perspective we recommend is setting up an e-newsletter. So you can email people and gather email addresses and correspond with people directly via email. That's actually incredibly valuable and cheap or free. Also, there are obviously the sort of, if you like, traditional ways using the print media, but also using things like print newsletters, notice boards, print surveys that you put through people's doors. We work with a lot of councils on generating those. So there's quite a few different ways of approaching people who are not on social media.
Oh, that's fantastic. And social media policies, do you have any pro formas for those?
No, we don't do policies with councils. We work in partnership with councils to develop strategies, which we do bespoke. So that involves working, but we don't provide any pro formas on policy as such, because that's not an area that we advise councils on.
Okay, and should councils have a policy for social media, do you think, James?
Yes, I think a policy in hand with a strategy is important. I mean, looking at when you say social media policy, there's obviously elements to that. It's worth certainly thinking about policies around how you manage your social media and how you're going to manage your content, but that should definitely go in hand with the development of the strategy, because what you tend to find is the policy and the strategy are necessary together because one informs the other. So we'd certainly recommend councils look at a social media or actually a communication strategy if they don't already have one in place, and developing the policy at the same time.
Okay, and finally, I have a question from Alison. They've had people posting misinformation or criticising the council on other group Facebook pages. Is there any ways to address this, and do you have any advice for them, please?
You should always correct misinformation. It's dangerous to let that just sit there and it needs to be challenged. It's a matter of finding out, in the individual circumstances, they're different in each place. I mean, ideally, you'd want kind of perhaps councillors challenging that for you if it was in groups outside the council's own Facebook page. But it's important that it's challenged up front. Criticising the council, well, councils, particularly the more active you are, the more you're going to receive people being perhaps quite unfair to you. But again, it's important to keep getting your message out there. And the thing I would really say about this, and this is where I return to strategy, is having a clear idea of what it is you're trying to communicate, i.e. your messages, and having those agreed within the council so that you can just keep pushing forward with the message you want to give, not the message people are trying to give about you.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks ever so much, James.
Okay.
There you go. Thank you again, James, for joining us today. Please have a good time. We'll see you again. Thank you. Right. So we're getting ready to have a bit of a quick break. So in the break, we will be playing a short video to have a little listen to what Nikki has to say from Corfe Mullen. Nicola Gray, thank you.
Really clever thing is it's purpose built for one thing. It's not trying to be all things to all people, and that's where a lot of the other accounts packages let themselves down, because they're trying to be all things to all people and they're trying to basically put everyone into one box, and town councils do not fit into that box. No, they don't. And it's really nice to be able to go and people know what you're talking about when you're talking about AGARs and when you're talking about, and yes, there are other businesses that deal with those sorts of things, but it's town councils. It's a very, very specific way of doing accounting. Yeah. And it's not like anything else. So it's nice to have a tailored thing where you're going to go and they get it. You ask a question, they get it. Yeah. That's
Yeah, no, that's really nice to hear. I think I don't think everybody knows that our support team are qualified and par-qualified accountants, and you don't pay extra for how many of the times you pick the phone up or ask a question or email.
And they never shy away from that.
Brilliant.
No matter how difficult the question, they never shy away from the question. They always say, not sure, I'm going to look at that and come back. And they always do, every time they have, every
Fantastic.
time. And they've always come back with a solution. So,
yes. Oh, that's lovely to hear. I'm going to tell Jane so that she can know.
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. System that they're using, and actually sometimes it might be wise to have a look around. Systems change, Scribe has obviously evolved over time and has improved and has, answered people's questions and queries, and is, as I've already said, takes on board when you raise something, it, gets looked at. That's how it has excelled at what it does.
Fantastic. Thank you for joining us today, Nicola. It's been a great pleasure to see you again, and I'm really pleased that things are going well at Corfe Mullen.
Thank you, Mel. Thank you.
Hi everybody, welcome back. I hope you managed to grab a coffee or a cup of tea. So we're really excited about our next speaker, Helen Lawson. She did speak last year, so she's a returning speaker, but was hugely popular. For those that don't know Helen, she's a trainer in well-being, and she's an author, public speaker. This is her book here, From Surviving to Thriving, Unlocked. Just a shout out, people, if you feel like you're in surviving mode, press yes. We'll see the chats there, and then, or are you in thriving mode? Do you want to press yes? Put thriving or surviving in the chat there. So Helen, how are you doing?
Well, thank you. Really glad to be back. It was a brilliant event last year, so really hoping we can do the same again.
Yeah, definitely. It seems to be going really well this year. Definitely the numbers are up, so really looking forward to hearing your talk, and then we'll catch up at the end for some Q&A.
Fab. And can I just double check with you? You want me done by 12:15? Is that right?
Can I get a signal from 12:15? What time? We're going to have a little. I don't know what the schedule is, so.
We'll go for 12:15.
12:10. Yeah, I mean, it also depends how much. 12:10. How many questions does that allow?
About
About 5-minute questions. Yeah, cool. All right, over to you, Helen.
Lovely,
Cheers.
thank
Bye.
you. Thanks. Good morning, everybody. I nearly said good afternoon there. I was getting carried away with myself. So apologies. I'm just going to share my screen with you, if you can bear with me. Hopefully you can see my screen. Yeah, let's go for it then. I'll rely on the fact that somebody somewhere will shout at me if things don't look as they ought to. So first of all, I would love to say that I really am delighted to be back with you today. The feedback from last year, where I know we were at a time where everybody had had a really difficult time, and it felt very much like everybody just needed to be given permission to feel like they were feeling, and that somehow everybody felt like they were the outlier if they weren't coping particularly well after the difficult year we've had. And now this year, it feels like people feel the same, but for different reasons. So last year, it was all about lockdown. This year, a lot of it is actually about re-entry, as they're calling it, where we're coming out of lockdown and back into the world that we once knew, but that's very different. So I'm going to talk about moving from anxiety to optimism. And the first thing that I would like to say to every delegate that's here in the audience is, you are here for a reason. There was something about this day, this session that appealed to you that you thought, I can get some benefit from this. The biggest enemy to getting anything out of this session is going to be your other online activities, checking your emails and so on. So I would just say to you, it's only half an hour. Give yourself over entirely to the session that we've got and see what you can get out of it. And the first thing that I'm going to ask you to do, which will help you get the best that you can out of this, is to choose one of the following 4 options that you think most accurately describes intelligence. This is about mindset. And mindset is something which helps shape us as human beings. So the 4 options, and if you're familiar with the work of Carol Dweck, these will be familiar to you, are: your intelligence is something very basic about you that you can't change very much. You can learn new things, but you can't really change how intelligent you are. No matter how much intelligence you have, you can always change quite a bit. Or you can always substantially change how intelligent you are. Now, I'm just going to ask you not to share this publicly, but just to think for yourself which you think is true. I'm going to give you a moment to do that, maybe reread the options. And when you've done that, I want you to think about why you might have arrived at that decision. Because I'm going to tell you that if you answered anything less than 4, I would suggest there might be some room for improvement. Because if you picked number 1, for example, your intelligence is something very basic about yourself that you can't change very much. I would just urge you to look at the last 18 months and look at what you have learned. Now, intelligence is nothing more than the acquisition of knowledge and skills and the application of those knowledge and skills. We have learned a whole new vocabulary. We've learned different ways of living. Now, that means that we can change our intelligence because we're all more intelligent in some way or another than we were 18 months ago. And you're all more intelligent in the job that you do than you were a year ago. Number 1 is really limiting. It suggests that you're quite a fixed individual. Whereas number 4, which is where I suggest most of us ought to be, we can always substantially change how intelligent we are, is, in my experience, the truth. But the problem we have is if we don't believe it, then it won't be true. Because if you believe you can't be much more intelligent than you are, with intelligence just being the acquisition of knowledge and skills and the application of the same, then you won't change very much. But if you believe you can, you will. And the beauty of this information, and the reason I'm talking about this when I'm talking about anxiety, is because actually, if you feel that you can't change and adapt, you're much more likely to be anxious. Because if you know you can change and adapt, then you know that anything thrown at you is something that it might not come instinctively or instantly, but you can get there. So if you're thinking that maybe 1, 2, or 3 was your answer, just have a little think again and ask yourself, how many times have you learned new things and then been able to thrive as a result of that? So we're talking about anxiety. What is anxiety? First of all, we all experience it. It is a feeling of unease. It's something that you can't necessarily put your finger on, but you know it's there. It may entail worry, fear, tension, and it can be mild to severe. It's often about what will or may happen. And the may happen is really important because anxiety can be about not something that's staring you in the face, but something you're predicting might stare you in the face. It can be experienced in physical sensations. So you can actually feel an upset stomach or a headache, or it might be in the thoughts that you have. But crucially, and this is so important, we're in a world now where thankfully the dialogue about mental health and mental illness has expanded, but that has led us to use some terms interchangeably and incorrectly. Anxiety is not a diagnosis. It is a perfectly natural human experience. So when people say, I suffer from anxiety, that might be correct, but that is not necessarily the same thing as having a mental health condition, which anxiety is a factor of. So if you feel anxiety, and you've heard all these people talking about experiencing anxiety and suffering from anxiety, don't feel that that is in some way a weakness. It is not. Anxiety is a normal human experience. And our mission today is to explore when is it a problem, and crucially, what are we going to do about it? So when is it a problem? First and foremost, when it's affecting your day-to-day life. And that means that all of a sudden, or maybe not all of a sudden, maybe you've experienced it for some time. And of course, I'm very much aware that this presentation for some of you might be less about what you feel, and it might be about you wanting to support other people in your life. And that's absolutely fine, because the more you understand about anxiety, the more you can help people who might be experiencing it. So anxiety is a problem when it affects day-to-day life and you don't feel you can carry on day-to-day life as you would have done. When the severity or frequency exceeds your tolerance levels. So it might be so severe you feel kind of crippled by it, or it might be happening so often that you feel that it's a real detriment to your life. When you kind of get anxiety out of proportion, and you can see other people seem to be coping with things reasonably well, although word of caution on that, how people seem to be coping and how they are coping can be very different things. So are you getting things out of proportion? And if those things are something that you're experiencing, just remember that anxiety is very treatable. Normally, first and foremost, psychological therapies would be looked at. And if that doesn't work, maybe combination therapy with drug and psychological therapies. And some people have what's called a looming cognitive style. And that just means that if something might happen, you might begin to feel it as if it's really actually happening. So let's take the example of some money disappears out of your bank account and you go into a blind panic. And all of a sudden you can feel it coming towards you as if it's really happening. And you experience all the feelings in your body and the sensations as if it's happening. And you're living that as if you're in the moment, that the worst you can imagine is happening in that moment, when in fact, the worst that you can imagine isn't happening at all. All that's happened is an unexplained or an ambiguous event, and you don't know what's happening. But this looming cognitive style is when that becomes bigger and bigger and bigger, and it feels like you're there in the moment. And a looming cognitive style is something that it's well worth trying to get a grip on, because you're getting carried away with something that's not actually happening. And one thing that can really help with that is reminding yourself how much you can control. Because if we fall into the danger zone of believing that other people or other events control our mood state, that's extremely disempowering. What we need to remember is we control our mood state. In large part, we control our mood state. Now, very quickly, just in case one of these might be applicable to you or you want a bit more information, there are diagnoses associated with anxiety, and the numbers next to each one are how many people in the UK suffer from these conditions in a week in the UK on average. So mixed anxiety and depression, 8 in 100 people will experience them. So now start thinking about how many people are in this virtual room and how many people you know. If 8 in 100 in an average week are experiencing it, when you get to the bottom of this list, you will know somebody who is experiencing a diagnosis associated with anxiety. And crucially, it's not fixed. If you have one of these things, you don't experience it all the time, every week, all year long. People move in and out, which means that really even more people than this suggests are experiencing these things. Generalised anxiety disorder would be 6 in 100. Post-traumatic stress disorder, a major feature of which is anxiety, it would be 4 in 100. Phobias are all about anxiety of something or other, 2 in 100. Obsessive compulsive disorder, 1 in 100. Panic disorder would be less than 1 in 100. And social anxiety disorder, at the time of print, there were no numbers available for this. So when we talk about anxiety, that's the normal human condition. When we talk about these diagnoses associated with anxiety, then that's something which is a diagnosed mental health condition. And something which is prevalent for a lot of people is this re-entry anxiety. Now, re-entry is the term that's being used about coming out of lockdown and getting back into society, maybe going back to work. And what I would say is that for some of you listening, you might be thinking, well, crikey, we've done that. That was months ago. But believe me, there are lots of people out there who really haven't done that yet, who are still working from home, whose companies are still saying they need to work from home, who are not socialising as they were previously, and who are suffering from an anxiety specifically about re-entry to the world. Now, most of the stuff we'll talk about is applicable whether your anxiety is general anxiety or specifically about re-entry. But these things in particular for people concerned about re-entry will be things that may be bothering them. So should I go to that event? Should I be with unvaccinated people? And if not, how do I manage that? Have people in my home? Do I want people in my home? Or do I have to actually say, no, I can't have people in my home because I'm too worried about the implications of that? What are the risks for my family members? Can I still wear a mask even though I'm not required to wear a mask? And as happened to me when I first went to an event after lockdown, what if they blow out the candles on the birthday cake? Do I want to be around that? Do I want to eat the birthday cake? When I hold a birthday party, what will I do about that? These are things that people are not handling because they haven't thought about them in advance. So when you've got an event coming up, if you can just try and think, well, what's coming? How do I need to prepare myself? What am I going to do with it? I do apologise. I've got a postman at the window waving at me, so I'm just waving back at him. So when we think about anxiety, we need to think ahead. That's our best strategy. And then we're going to look at some specific steps that will help us through any anxiety we might be feeling. And the first step is acceptance. Now, I don't know about you and how you found lockdown and how you're finding things now, or actually how you find all sorts of things you might have anxiety with. But acceptance is absolutely the first step to dealing with anxiety. You don't have to like the way the world is. You don't have to like the way your employer's dealing with it. You don't have to like any of those things, but you do need to accept them as they are. Because the longer you don't accept them, the more you're battling with something that is a futile waste of your time. Now, for those of you that joined us last year, or even if you've maybe seen a clip that was shared about this event, you may have seen this. And this is the invaluable tool that will help you understand, what do I have to accept and what can I do something about? So these 3 circles were developed by an author called Stephen Covey, the author of The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And he said that in order to deal better with our world, we need to work out what's in our circle of control, which is the inner circle, what's in our circle of influence, the middle circle, and what's in our circle of concern. So it's all very well for me saying to you, you need to accept things as they are, but what do you need to accept? And what can you do something about? Well, the inner circle, the green circle, is your circle of control. That's the stuff you can really do something about. And I make no apologies for repeating this year, even though we covered it last year, because often we need a reminder, and it is the foundation and the cornerstone of our well-being, in my opinion. So our circle of control is this: my actions, my reactions. That's all I can control. The next circle out is our circle of influence. That's the stuff where I can actually influence other people, and that may be beneficial to the situation that I find myself in. So when I talk about influence, it might be that you can influence how your friends and your family behave. It might be that you can influence how your boss wants you to return to the office, or the precautions that are taken at work. You can't directly make them happen, but you can influence them. And then the third circle, the outer circle, that's our circle of concern. That's the stuff we really can't do anything about. And I actually refer to that as my circle of acceptance rather than my circle of concern. Because once I've identified that I cannot do anything, I can't control it, I can't influence it, I just have to accept it, I know where to put my energy. And my energy is not worth being spent on something I cannot change. So, for example, the fact there is a global pandemic, the fact there is a fuel crisis, the fact that there are so many things going on in the world that we're uncomfortable about, if we can't change them, but we can accept them, then we can move our energy into what we can control and what we can influence so that we can be an active agent in making things the way we want them to be, or at least experiencing them the best way we possibly can. Step 2, avoid avoidance. If you're anxious about something, the worst thing you can possibly do is to avoid it, because if you avoid it, the fear gets bigger and bigger and bigger and more overwhelming. So let's take reentry as an example. If you're avoiding going into certain situations because they make you anxious, if there's a really good reason for that, that's fine. If you've really risk assessed it and decided, no, that doesn't work for me, that's okay. But if actually it's just a fear of something that may happen that there isn't really a genuine concern about, that avoidance is really unhealthy, because you will continue to move away from that thing and allow the fear to grow. Our step 3 is that we could ask ourselves what could go right. Unfortunately, if you tend to be quite anxious, and I'm going to hold my hands up and say I am one of those people, I find fear in many things. I anticipate, in one way, it feels like a blessing, because I anticipate what might go wrong, and then I try and avoid it. But that gets out of hand when you start to imagine things that never happen, and that you then think about the next step and the next step and the next step. And before you know it, your head is clouded with 1,000 anxieties and worries, which if you were to revisit them in a week's time, never happened, were never going to happen. So if you do have that slightly anxious style, what you might find yourself doing is saying, what could go wrong? And then that's my reason for not doing it. But what I would ask you to do is, when you're looking at that box of possibilities, think of that image and ask yourself not what could go wrong, but what could go right. And the sorts of things that could go right are numerous. You might meet somebody you didn't expect to meet. An opportunity might present itself that you didn't expect. You might just simply enjoy yourself. You might be exposed to things that have been long in your past, and you suddenly remember how important they were to you. And certainly if during lockdown you found that some of the joy went out of your life, but now you feel that coming back into the world, you're anxious about things for good reason, then you now need to think about, well, okay, what could go right if I were to do this? And you might start asking yourself, you might start asking yourself things like, what have I missed? Is it good company? Is it good food? Is it live music? And then can I expose myself to those opportunities in a way that feels safe for me and that I know there will be something good in it for me? But it's a process. It's not something you want to necessarily throw yourself wholeheartedly into immediately and then find that it was all a bit too much. It's something you want to do gradually in a way that you find works for you. And just ask, what could go right? And then there's something that a lot of people are experiencing, which is social anxiety. Now, a lot of people experienced social anxiety well before we came into the pandemic. But now, having been out of circulation for a lot of time and living our lives from kind of here up, more and more people are experiencing social anxiety. And again, when I talk about social anxiety, I'm not talking about social anxiety disorder. I'm not talking about diagnosed mental health conditions that you need specialist support for. I'm talking about situations where you might be walking into an environment and you just feel like you're not quite sure that you're going to be okay. And that can feel a lot like that. That can feel like maybe everybody is going to be looking at me. It can feel like maybe you're not going to know the right thing to say. It can feel like people might be looking at you a bit oddly. It can feel like maybe you've just forgotten the art of conversation, or that nothing sits right. You've been at home in your tracksuit for so long that getting dressed up feels like an odd thing to do, and everything feels a little bit artificial. And that's something which can become quite overwhelming. And again, when we talk about avoidance, this is something people avoid doing. They don't want to get back into these social situations. But it's so well worth getting back into the social situations, because we as human beings are social creatures. In our DNA, we're programmed that if we feel isolated, that is something that we experience as a bad thing. Because historically, going back generations and generations to our ancestors and prehistoric times, if we felt isolated, if we wandered away from our tribe, we were in danger. And so now that's hardwired into us. If we feel isolated, that comes with real negative, both mental and physical health conditions. Loneliness and isolation have about the same negative health impact on you as smoking. That's a massive statistic. So if you feel that you're avoiding social situations because you don't feel comfortable with them anymore, ask yourself, what can I do about that? And the answer is you can plan and prepare. And think about the art of conversation. We're so used to taking the blame for everything, aren't we? We tend to hold ourselves responsible for everything. So when we get into a situation where it is a social situation, and all of a sudden it feels like the conversation doesn't go very well. Even in an interview, we can do this, and we tend to think, well, that interview didn't go well, I must have been terrible. It takes two to tango, people. You know, we actually don't live in a vacuum. We're not all on our own. And if we're going into a conversation at work or socially, we need the other person to play ball with us. We need to relax and breathe into the space that we're in. It's only a conversation. It's not a performance. And maybe a good thing to do is to share your concerns. You will often find that if you say, crikey, I feel a bit out of sorts with this feels quite alien to me now, the person that you're talking to will often feel the same. In a survey of 900 people that was done as we were coming out of lockdown, the statistics were that 37% of people were looking forward to coming out of lockdown. 36% were not looking forward to coming out of lockdown. So over a third of people were not looking forward to it. The chances that you'll end up getting in a conversation with somebody in the same position is quite high. And then the remainder didn't feel strongly either way. And when you have a conversation, and I would say this is a lesson for life, this is not just a lesson if you experience anxiety, is when you're talking to somebody, really listen to understand them. What we tend to do is get a kind of performance anxiety and think, right, I must be ready with my witty retort or be ready to say something interesting. Actually, what the person you're talking to really wants you to do is to listen to them, to be able to sense that you understood what they were saying. And then, of course, you formulate your response. But if that response is on the tip of your tongue because really all you've thought about all the time they're talking is what you're going to say next, that isn't a good feeling. And you may think of times where that's happened to you. If you're worried about going into these situations, prepare a list of questions to ask. Now, I'm not suggesting that that list of questions is you walking in with a notebook, but just think, what would I say? And then really importantly, what will I respond if they ask me? Because that's how conversations are supposed to flow. And if that person doesn't ask you any questions, that's not your fault. So don't beat yourself up about the fact that a conversation is sometimes not great, but not because of you. Crucially, if you feel anxious about social situations, and this was one of the highest areas of anxiety when people were surveyed, I think 46% of people said that their biggest concern was that social anxiety. Put the spotlight elsewhere. Stop worrying about yourself and how you look and how you sound and if you're the one coming across as intelligent. And instead put the emphasis on the other person, of really listening, of really understanding, of showing empathy to them, of being the person they want to be in conversation with because the spotlight is on them. And these are all things that help with the art of conversation and relieve your anxiety about social situations, because suddenly it's not really about you anymore. It's about them. And that is the best sort of person to have a conversation with. Our step 5 is to seek progress, not perfection. Some of us are really hard on ourselves. And if we are coming through an anxiety, it might be because we're doing something for the first time, or it might be because we have a fear of failure that other people might observe us doing something wrong. We should always be about progress and not perfection, because success is an iterative process. It takes time to get to perfection. But those of us with some perfectionist tendencies, again, hand held high, we don't like that feeling, because if we like to be a perfectionist, if we think that's important, then we don't like other people seeing our weaknesses. And that can stop us trying new things. That can cause us to feel anxious. But if we want to be optimistic about the world, we have to have faith that people aren't looking to wrap us for the wrong things. What they want to do is see us succeed eventually. And anybody with a good head on their shoulders knows this is a process. And we're really good at this with kids. I want you all to think of a time when you have seen a baby learn to walk. Maybe it was one of your own children. That might take you to a happy place. Even better, because a good frame of mind is going to take you to a more positive frame of mind. I do apologise. My laptop has just leapt on its own. So thinking of that baby learning to walk, and everybody stands around and they watch the baby shuffle and then get up on its feet, maybe hold on to something, take the first few steps, and then it flops back down and it's all over. Does everybody clap and cheer? Yay, well done, that was brilliant. Of course they do, because they understand that that process is part of getting to the success. But as adults, what we do instead is say, actually, it didn't work. You might as well give that up as a bad job. Don't bother trying that again. We would never do that to a baby through all their learning experiences, because we understand that it's about progress, not about perfection. So we need to cut ourselves a break and do the same. So how do you adjust your approach? Accept that perfection is an illusion. I don't care what you see on social media, it's an illusion. 3 pictures a day from somebody is not their life. And that creates a barrier, because we think, well, if they can do it like that, we should do it like that. When we're thinking about things like re-entry, we need to ask ourselves questions like, if not now, when am I going to do it? When am I going to feel ready? Because I would venture that while it's still very scary times, and I do not minimise the fear that a lot of people have at the moment, I'm a risk-averse person myself. But if not now, when? Is this the way you want to live your life for however long this may continue? Or are you prepared to accept that there are lots of steps you can take to minimise the risks, but that avoidance is not the answer, and that when you go back into the world, you might not get it right first time, but if you can be open and honest about that and accept progress over perfection, there is a way forward. Do you have reasons for not doing things? If you do, don't do them, that's great. Or are you making excuses? Can you accept that mistakes are okay? Do things like mindfulness, like grounding yourself, like being grateful. So you might be grateful for something as simple as, I don't want to go back and live the life that I lived before, but I'm grateful I've got the opportunity. So let's not talk about moving back to the old ways, going back to how things were. Let's think about moving forward to a better way, where we retain all those things we enjoyed from lockdown, but we embellish them with all the stuff that we loved pre-lockdown, and we create our own futures. We are an active agent in what that looks like. And you can do things like, I'm not going to ask you to do it now, but you can tense everything in your body for 10 seconds and then relax and repeat, because that is a really good way to physically get the anxiety out of your body. And then I'm going to leave you with my final step, but we've still got a couple of slides to go after that. And my final step is to say, well, okay, we've talked a lot about what's in here, about your attitude, about your mindset, about how you can think about things differently. But now I'm going to think about what's out there. There is so much out there. And a serendipity mindset can really help you with that. And this is something that I picked up from a book called The Serendipity Mindset, The Art of Creating Good Luck by Dr. Christian Bush. And he says that in our lives, we experience unplanned moments. And with those unplanned moments comes unexpected good luck very often. And from the unexpected good luck, if we make some proactive decisions, we can end up with positive outcomes. And I'm going to give you one quick example of that in my life. I left my last job 5 years ago to start my own business. And I thought, well, every job I've had has been project management. So I'm going to go into project management. I loathe project management. I hate it. And then somebody came to me and said, you used to work for us. We've got a gap for our training. Will you come and be our freelance trainer? And I thought, why did I not think of that? That's what I love doing. No, I've never had a job title that included it, but that's what I love. That's my passion. So I made a proactive decision and I became a freelance trainer, and they have been the best 5 years in my professional life that I've ever had. So that was a massively positive outcome. And I think most of you, if you look back in your life when you've experienced an unplanned moment with some unexpected good luck and then did something proactive, you became the active agent, you will find that you've had positive outcomes. But sometimes we don't see the moments. Sometimes we're so busy, stuck in the anxiety, we're not noticing the opportunities, and then we don't recognise the good luck or make the proactive decisions to get the positive outcomes. So think about times when that's worked for you, and then look to explore where you can find them some more. And then I would also say that as we come to the end of the presentation, a couple of thoughts to leave you with. The first thing is, I love this quote. It's from John Kabat-Zinn, who's the kind of father of modern day mindfulness. And he says, you can't stop the waves, but you can learn to surf. And with anxiety, it comes in waves, but you can surf it with all the hints and tips that I've suggested to you. You can learn to surf the waves and come towards optimism. And something like the serendipity mindset, that's a real optimistic mindset, because it's showing that you realistically believe that there is reason to be optimism because there's opportunity there. You just have to be spotting it and connecting the dots. And finally, I would say that there is a belief and there's a saying that knowledge is power. And actually, I really fundamentally disagree with that. On this whole day of talks that you're having today, you will gain lots and lots of knowledge. But the power will come when you apply that knowledge. When you think back to that growth mindset and say, yes, I can do something different. Knowledge is not power. The application of knowledge is power. And that is what can take you from anxiety to optimism, and hopefully to every day being a slightly better day, full of less avoidance, full of more progress, not perfection. Thanks so much for your time, and I'm really happy to take any questions if you have them.
Thank you, Helen. Good, you've unshared your screen. Really appreciate it. I could listen to you all day. It's such a hot topic. Me personally, I've experienced anxiety a lot over my life, and particularly the last year with my daughter. She just randomly started getting really bad panic attacks a year ago. And, we've learned a lot of these things to support her, listen to her, and, say that she's not on her own. And we're very lucky to find a really good art therapist. And now I would say she has completely turned from surviving to thriving, and she educates her classmates as well. So it's a really good topic. We've got a poll. Are we going to run a poll?
Yes, we'll just run a poll quickly. So we want to know, how do you unwind after a long day of work?
Cool. And we've got a couple of questions. We've only got we've got a few questions. We've only probably got time for one or two. And when we asked that question earlier, a lot of people were saying they're in survival mode. Only a few said thriving, and hopefully some of them now, after seeing your talk, feel like they've got the tools to transition from surviving to thriving. But Jess, do you want to read out one of the questions?
Yeah, so the first one is, how do we deal with the anxiety that comes from overthinking the consequences of our actions?
Oh, now that's a really interesting one. That's very specific. So the consequences of our actions. I would come back to what we can control, what we can influence, and what we can accept. So if our actions have already taken place, then maybe we can go back and do something about that. That's what we can control. Maybe we can influence it by having a conversation with somebody. But if it's been and done, then we really need to move to that point of acceptance, because if we don't, then we are just torturing ourselves through that rumination, and it's the energy wasted. And if we can't do anything about that decision and it's gone and our actions have been and done, What we can do is then go back to our circle of control. And what I can control is what I will do with that knowledge for next time. And what I will do with that knowledge for next time is plan, in a similar situation, what would I do, or how could I avoid that happening again? And then start to think proactively about it, because that's an empowering thing to do. We want to be in the empowering bit where we're doing something constructive and proactive, not in the bit where we are catastrophizing and ruminating over things that we just can't change.
Cool. Yeah, we've got time for one more question, Jessica.
Yeah, so Jennifer has said, we are finding people who are anxious regarding the pandemic are aggressive about things like space and masks despite the changes. Is there a good way to help diffuse this arising?
Okay, that's a tricky one because I'm not quite sure of the context. So I'm not sure whether that is about that they like the changes or they don't like the changes, they think they're too strict or they're not too strict. I would say with any situation like this where it's about a kind of, where it's maybe a compliance issue or people's understanding of a compliance issue, I would be inclined first of all to be really clear about what the rules are. And if the rules aren't going to be enforced, don't make them rules, because that's what upsets people. It's about setting expectations. So first of all, think of the foundations of what's in place. Are the expectations clear? Does everybody know what they can do and how they can follow them? And then other than that, the only thing I would say is what really wins people over is humanity. So when things don't go right, a sincere apology and acceptance and empathy of whatever it is that is bothering them about that situation. Saying sorry doesn't mean that we're taking responsibility for it. It means that we are empathising with them. So I'm sorry, I don't feel like I can be very specific because the question is a little out of context, but I hope that would be helpful.
Okay, thanks, Helen. Thank you for your time. What are you doing for the rest of the day?
I've got another session to do actually in about an hour's time. So
okay, well, good luck with that. And one final question. We've got the Spotify playlist going, which we'll be playing in our break. What is your favourite song? Putting you on the spot.
Oh, now that's a tricky one. I'd probably go for a Stevie Wonder.
Stevie Wonder, yeah?
Yeah, probably something like Superstitious, something with a good beat.
Okay, we'll get that added to the playlist. Okay, have a good day and good luck later. And everyone, don't forget to have a look at Helen's book later.
Lovely.
Cheers.
Thanks very much for having me. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to hand over to Mel, who's going to introduce our next speaker. Over to you, Mel.
Welcome back, everybody, again. So cybercrime isn't something new, and in our new lives of connectivity, working from home, working remotely, we've also just heard about engaging with social media. So the increasing uptake of our lives online means that the risk of being attacked in some form of cybercrime is increasingly rapidly. BHIB is a specialist in insurance broker for town and parish councils. They are also the official insurance partner for NAUC, and we are very lucky today to have Luke Perkins from BHIB here to talk to us about cybercrime and ways to protect yourself and your council. Over to you, Luke. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to the cyber awareness session as part of the Scribefest agenda today. I hope you're enjoying the day so far, and we hope that you are getting lots of information. So our session will be covering off cyber awareness, the risks that you face as a council and how to mitigate against some of those risks. So we only have 15 minutes, so we will get started straight away. Just a brief introduction into who I am and who BHIB councils are. We are a council specialist. Hopefully you have heard of us. We are the primary sponsor of National Association of Local Councils, and we provide a lot of free training sessions and free resources all around risk mitigation and information available to councils completely free of charge, and cyber awareness being one of these. My name's Luke Perkins. I am the Partnerships Development Manager at BHIB Insurance Brokers and BHIB Councils Insurance. If you would like any further information, if you would like any help with your own risks, or you would like to find out more information about what we've discussed today, or even arrange a training session for your own local region or area, please do contact us. The email address is insurance@bhibcouncils.co.uk, and that is at the bottom of every slide, so hopefully you'll be able to find that. Equally, you can go onto the website and find our contact details there. But my name's Luke, and I will be happy going through the cyber awareness training for an introduction to councils today. So to set the scene, we wanted to make you aware of some quite alarming statistics that are only getting worse, unfortunately, as time goes on. UK local authorities have experienced in excess of 98 million cyber attacks over the last 5 years. So that is a very high number. Break that down, this means that there are at least 37 attempted breaches of UK local authorities every minute. So just say that once again, that's 37 attempted breaches of UK local authorities every minute. So that's a very high number. At least 1 in 4 councils have experienced a cyber security incident. And also UK local authorities do not provide any mandatory training in cybersecurity awareness for staff, and 16% do not provide any training at all. So good news is this will form part of your training, and as mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we are happy to do webinars such as this. We can pre-record them like this one, or we can do live sessions with a Q&A at the end via an association of local councils in the area, or we can do one specific training for your council itself. If of interest, please do contact us and we'll be happy to arrange that for you completely free of charge. Now, to go through how traditional crime and cybercrime is different now, and to explain how that has developed over the course of time. So we can all think of what traditional crime would look like. So you've got theft of cash, theft of goods, damage to property, you know, the usual kind of crime that we are well too familiar with. Now, cybercrime is sort of hidden. It's not so obvious what that crime would look like. So instead of theft of actual cash, you know, kept on the property, you've got electronic funds. So you've got money held in accounts, and you can use online banking to access. You've also got various different money that you would store online in accounts and checking accounts that you have access to, and maybe multiple people would have access to those accounts and can draw from that account. We've also got theft of data, so where previously people would be trying to break into your property to steal, you know, physical items. Now people are trying to steal the data that you hold on your local population, or the data you hold just to carry out the jobs that you would do as a local authority. So very, very important that that data is kept safe due to the different GDPR regulations that we hope that you're familiar with. If you're not, that is a separate training session that we'd be happy to give some information on. And then lastly, you've got damage to property, which is now damage to digital assets. That could be your website, that could be your hosting systems, that could be your accountancy software that you would use. Luckily, someone like Scribe, you outsource that, and that's their security. So you benefit from enhanced security by using someone else's platforms. So yeah, lots to consider there, and definitely different types of losses that you could face. Now, we will go through in detail, we will do a summary of exactly the type of cyber risks that you face and cyber attacks that you could face as a local council. But one of the main ones we wanted to highlight and go into a bit more detail on was the business email fraud. So there's 3 different types of business email fraud that you could see as a council, and these are the ones that we see the most often, and these are, I would imagine, a lot of you listening today, you may have seen some of these and been on the receiving end of these, and hopefully no one's fallen for them, but we know all too well that it very much does happen. So version 1 is account compromise. So classic, they've cracked the account, they've reset your password and have access to your other email address that allows you to that you would use as a backup, so that's quite often the case. Or even you've written down the password and someone somehow has got hold of that information. Or sometimes, quite often, you use the same password. We all do it. We shouldn't do it. For multiple accounts, that account is hacked, and they also have your email address, and they know what systems you use and try to gain access. So they log into the account and they can transfer money from that into their own account from your account. The second would be bogus invoice schemes. We've seen a big increase in this as well. So they would send in a random invoice pretending to be a supplier. So quite often what they would do is that they could hack a supplier's account and email account, produce a bogus invoice, send it to you. They may well be your supplier, but they just change the account number and sort code. So you think you're paying your monthly invoice for a service provider that you use. It may only be £1,000, or it could be a small amount, so you wouldn't necessarily think that any alarm bells would ring. But then you pay it. A couple of weeks later, your supplier gives you a call and says, "Oh, sorry, your account's overdue. We haven't received this money." And then they soon realise that actually the money has been paid, but their account, the invoice was for the wrong account details. Quite often. That is the case. Lastly, CEO fraud. So this is CEO impersonation. Call it CEO in the business world, but it could just be someone who has authority to issue payments, or who would say in your council, say, we need this payment being made ASAP to this account. Now, they will often pretend to be that person, but the good thing is that everyone has their strange ways around them of how they spell certain things, or how they position an email, what grammar they tend to use, and how they would sign it off. That could be very close, because sometimes they will watch an account, they'll be in the email system watching what's going in and out on a very regular basis, and they will use that template of how you normally communicate, issue that, and it's usually under some sort of time restraint. So it's, this supplier needs to be paid at this time, we are extremely late on the payment, please do this before the end of the day. And then they would also chuck in, I'm uncontactable for the next few hours, please get this paid, but it's okay, just get it done, but I will speak to you later. So naturally the person on the receiving end thinks, oh, this is very important, we need to make sure that that we need to get this paid, and I can't confirm the payment, so how do we do it? And that's how that money's then lost. So CFC Underwriting, one of our main insurers that we use, and one of the biggest suppliers of cyber insurance in the UK, have seen recorded that there's an 80% increase in the number of business email compromise attacks, so those ones that we've just gone through there, in the last 2 years. So 80% increase, so a huge increase, and something that we see often, and I'm sure that you have seen a couple of these attempts maybe yourself. So what are the main risks that a parish or town council faces currently? These are forever developing, but these are the first ones so business email fraud that we just discussed in detail, very, very important, high volume incidences in that area. Ransomware attacks, you may remember when the NHS was basically shut down completely because they were operating on old operating systems. They installed a software that just blocked the systems, and then it pulls up saying, if you don't, you're out of your systems, if you don't pay X amount of pounds into this online cryptocurrency kind of forum to our account, we will delete all the data, and you'll have to start from scratch. So that can be very expensive. You've got the phishing emails, which the ones that we've just described there, that you can send an email saying, click on this link for me, or this is the email that you've been waiting for, just click on it to download it, or what do you think of this file, and then attach to it, and then you click on it, and then you've installed harmful or malicious software that maybe could block you out of your systems, or they could have access to your emails from that. So very important again. CEO fraud, we just mentioned there, impersonation is a better way to describe that. Human error is a great one. So quite often clicking on that link is classed as human error, or logging into the wrong details, or even the biggest human error that we see all too often. So you've got 1,001 different passwords for 1,001 different softwares that you use. You write them down in your black book and you lose that black book, or you write it down on your desk and someone steals a post-it note. Quite often human error is the main cause of most losses. And also your software, your procedures are only good as the humans on the end of it, unfortunately. Denial of service attacks, so that is when they can fire off to your website to block your website, so they overpower your website. So again, that could then take down your digital assets that you use, your population, the people you serve can't access your systems, you have to pay for a new website, you lose that data, can be time time costly and expensive to reset up a brand new website. Telephone hacking is another one we've seen increase. So they will hack into a digital phone line and they will start making phone calls to overseas, rack up a huge telecoms bill, and you will have to pay that off the back of that. And they can use that phone line, they can divert phone calls from it and make phone calls they shouldn't be making phone calls through. And then lastly, it's data loss, so the GDPR element, so the General Data Protection Act. So yeah, going through that is a bit more detailed, but very important that you keep your data that you hold on other people as part of being a council safe and protected. So we wanted to make sure that in this quick, short, sharp session, you have some things to walk away with. Maybe try and take a screenshot of this if you can, take a picture on your phone. We don't have enough time to go through every single one of these listed, but please take a picture or email us and say, can we have that simple table that you've got as part of your presentation? insurance@bhibcouncils.co.uk, just to read some out on there. We've got educating your staff. That's always the top one. So thank you for joining this session today. And this is clearly one of the best things you can do. Human error is one of the main causes to stop human error. It's education, education, education. Very, very important. Another one to pull out on here is using recognised payment gateways for payments. So using big names such as Sage and other people to take payment rather than taking it down or writing down card details of other people's, or using the system and just, you know, typing it, getting it off the phone. Let the person who's got the card go through the payment system rather than you typing in payment systems. Falls in within GDPR. But please, if you'd like more information on this, or you'd like a screenshot of this, or this emailed to you, email me, Luke, and mine, obviously Luke, and then insurance@bhibcouncils.co.uk. Happy to send that over. So hopefully that's given you a really good insight of exactly the risks you face so far. We do have a cyber insurance policy, some information on the screen there. So the type, we can explain how the policy would react. It's very important that actually it's not treated as a normal insurance policy, is that, you know, this thing goes missing and then you get this much money back. It's actually really important to know that you have a response plan in place. So if something happens, you log on and you can't log on, you're blocked out of your system, or you realize there's been a data breach. If you have an insurance policy in place, you have a port of call to go, this has happened, what do we do next? And then they can come in, take over, or guide you throughout the process and say, okay, this is the response. You have a response team. This is what we should be doing. This is how we handle the PR. This is how we communicate with people that need to be informed that this has happened. The insurance policy can also cover the IT costs for ensuring the systems that are vulnerable. And also potentially cover any loss of money as a result of an invoice fraud or taking of digital finances. So that is very, very useful, because often trying to get that money back from the criminals themselves is also pretty much non-existent. It's extremely hard to do and extremely hard to chase for the authorities who are extremely overstretched in this space. We've also got the ability within the policy to also notify the data breaches as they happen. So such as with the data commissioner, they need to be addressed. And also it's the manpower that goes behind it. So the additional resource that you need to communicate that loss, the incident that's happened, and be able to allow you to free up time to carry on doing your day job, because that needs to happen still. But then also going forward, you'll be able to get that to get further support to help you tackle the problem that's in hand whilst carry on doing what you're doing. So for us, we are a specialist in the council sector, as you're fully aware. As part of our specialist offer, we can use we've got a fixed price premium of £299. We do give you free data breach response, alert and monitoring services. We also give you a 1 hour free cyber and GDPR consultation compliance specialist who is also a counsellor as well, so we can give that information. Now, I do hope that this has been very useful today. It is a very short, sharp session. If you would like to know more information on this, hopefully you're a bit more aware of what you started, you've learned something new. If you'd like to arrange a free consultation with us, completely free of charge, there is no need to buy an insurance policy after this. Obviously, we advise that you should, to be protected. But if you would like to attain any information from us, please do email us at insurance@bhibcouncils.co.uk. We'd be more than happy to arrange that session, and we would be more than happy to provide more free advice and free guidance on the documents that we produce for you. So I hope this has been useful, and we look forward to hearing from you soon. Enjoy the rest of your day with Scribefest. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Luke. That is hugely informative on a very important subject. Unfortunately, we can't take questions today for him. He's had to dash to another presentation, but still very, very important. And on a personal note, I can say that cybercrime and the criminals that run these syndicates have become super smart. At the beginning of the year, I had somebody that impersonated my builder, and I've lost about £2,500. So it was a matter of weeks and weeks of grooming and sort of pretending to be somebody they were not. So it was, it's not always as straightforward as it sounds. It's not as clean cut that you would think, yes, you could recognise it. So just please be aware. If in doubt, I've been told by the police, is just pick the phone up and speak to the person that you think you're emailing and the person that's asking for funds. Thank you, Luke, really important. Right, so just another reminder, we've had a few more comments, in particular somebody that would like to share Helen Lawson's presentation to her parishioners. I think that's an excellent idea if you feel that's something that your community needs. We will be sharing presentations. We will be sharing the recording of today. If you prefer for it to be chopped up into the specific subjects, I'm sure we can do that. That's a very easy task for us to do. So yes, in short, you will receive all of the information and all of the bits from our speakers from today. We are going to have another short break. We are back at 12:50. And I would look forward to see, there we go, blooper. So I'm looking forward to seeing you all at 12:50. Have a good break. Thank you, everybody.
Hello and welcome back, everyone. I hope you're all comfortable and ready for a presentation from John about building smart local communities from the grassroots. So what's that all about then, John?
Oh, I was just filling around. Hi everybody, hope you enjoyed your lunch. Just had some pizza and sausage roll and got a whole bunch of cakes there to eat up, but I'll save that until after my talk. So yes, I'm going to talk about building smart local communities from the grassroots. This conference is dedicated to town and parish communities, and I'm actually new to your community. And so I'd like to tell you why I joined. I mean, I've naturally joined by joining Scribe. A little bit about myself. I am a geek. In particular, I have a background in mapping, so digital mapping, geographic maps. And I've done a lot of work with the tech community here in Norwich, supporting startups and also getting technology people together to solve local problems. And if I look back at my career, I've always kind of been involved at a local level using technology. And I had a really great start to my career in Namibia. I'm not sure any of you guys have been to Namibia, but if you have, why not shout out on Zoom chat? It is an amazing country and I highly recommend to go there when you can. So in the mid-1990s, they were really using a lot of paper maps. So my initial work there, I was actually backpacking and I randomly got a job mapping. So my initial work there was actually capturing digital maps. And one of my favourite projects was working in the Kavango region in the northeast of Namibia, as you see it there, small section up there. As you can see, it's a very sparse area. There's only still today really one main road going through it. So I worked with a team to map it. It's quite a daunting task because it actually is a small part of Namibia, but if you kind of measure it against England and Wales, it's actually bigger. So we were tasked with getting more detail behind that map. But because it was so big, we had to fly aeroplanes and capture aerial photographs, and we took them back to the office and were able to analyse those and capture basic infrastructure information such as roads, can't really call them roads, more dirt roads, and the small settlements. And then if we wanted more detailed data, we actually jumped in a car with a GPS and we went out there and captured just basic information, boreholes, schools, clinics, shops. It's almost like doomsday level data capture where there was not known, and it was hugely rewarding to meet a lot of these local people. We had an onboard interpreter who could speak the 7 languages in the area, and a lot of them didn't even know people knew they kind of existed. We come across villages that hadn't seen anyone for 1-2 years, and we said we're here to map them so the government does know they exist, or the chiefs do know they exist. And a lot of this data enabled the government to start delivering some basic services to that region. Initially it was all around family planning and birth control. So after a few years, I returned back to UK, and the internet was growing in popularity. I'm not sure if any of you remember multimap.com. I used to work for them, and that was more now putting maps online and making them accessible to everybody in the UK. And I think we were the top 10 website in the UK. And we're effectively replacing the paper, big fat yellow pages and paper maps, and making it much easier to look up location information. And we used to exhibit at consumer shows, and again the people really were amazed and found Multimap a tool that they use every day. And now we have maps in our pockets. In the last 10 years I have been focused on mobility, so that's really helping people move from A to B on public transport, not only the mass public transport, but also all the new mobility providers such as bike sharing schemes, e-scooters, etc. So this is working with really large public transport agencies. So you're very much many layers removed from the people on the street, and this is where I kind of started questioning myself and the impact I kind of was making in my career with people on the ground, because I felt like when you start working with the bigger tiers of organisation, as you stack up, we started a lot slower delivering projects, and often you're just stuck in a 1-2 year procurement process, and then you might work on a project for 1 or 2 years, and then it's the first time that an actual end user really receives the kind of the product that you're building. And often you would deliver the wrong thing. We were building really amazing apps powered by artificial intelligence that could predict where you need to go, but actually users, they just wanted a bus that came on time, was clean and safe. So you kind of do find yourself getting disconnected. And also we found like you have to really start compromising the local needs versus global scalability. So you're chasing the money, but then through that process you kind of aren't able to meet the local needs. So really I felt as I was progressing through my career, you're getting more and more disconnected from reality, and you get stuck in this trap of thinking technology can solve everything, and there really is, you begin to lack understanding and empathy of the needs of people, and that live on the street and need to get to work, need to get to health, entertainment, and all these kinds of things. And this can be evident in a lot of large-scale IT projects, and there's lots of examples of this top-down thinking that have failed, and often these million or billion down projects are completely scrapped. So with all this kind of in the background, I decided to kind of completely flip everything upside down again, and starting with people first. So I founded this event called Sync the City, and it basically, I'm not sure if any of you guys have heard of the term hackathon, but it's basically a unique event where and actually Norwich Live Streaming streamed the last event that we did, and it's a unique event where you basically get a whole bunch of strangers together with a mixture of different skills for the weekend, and you challenge them to build and launch a startup in a weekend, and you don't know what you're going to do. Anybody can go there and start trying to build a startup. So basically the event starts with anyone going up on stage. They've got an idea, a problem, a solution. They've got 1 minute to pitch it, and then we get the best ideas, and that goes through to team formation. And this is kind of an important part of, I guess, my learning in doing this event, is getting what we call cross-functional teams, getting everybody together who have the skills and the knowledge, the domain expertise, to work together and get a good diversity of people on a particular problem and goal. So that's kind of the key factor. Once you've got that team, cross-functional team, because historically or traditionally, a lot of people work in functional areas and they have their big departments, you know, and they don't interact too well, but you pick all the expertise and you create a small team to do that. Then we work with teams really to define their proposition, their problem statement and their solution statement, then what type of customers they're trying to solve their particular problems and the business model and everything. And when they've really got an idea, they have to take it out on the street. So they need to validate it and go out and interview people, talk to customers, listen to them and understand their problems, and then incorporate that feedback into their solution or their assumptions. And sometimes, you know, it really resonates with the potential customers, and you actually acquire customers during that phase. But you go back, and again, remember, this is all in a weekend, and you go back and you start building your prototype. And in software development, when you're building apps, it's kind of changed over the years now, and you use a method, you iterate on building something. And there's, you know, two good examples there of different ways to build, you know, a product. Incremental, which is kind of the old-fashioned way, where it's a long time before the end user get at stage 4 there, they get it. So initially there's no way for them to move from A to B. They've got a wheel, 2 wheels, then a sort of chassis with no engine, and then finally they're happy, but it's not quite what they were looking for. In software development now, particularly what we do in Scribe, is we deliver value as soon as we can. So we deliver the basic needs, and, you know, rather than it's 1 year, you only have to wait maybe 1 month, and we're delivering what we call a minimal viable product, such as we did this year with our bookings app. We had the basic functionality, and over the few months we've kind of iterated and improved it based on feedback. And then at the end of it, you get a very happy customer, because you're bringing them along the journey the whole way. You don't just talk to them at the beginning and then show them at the end after a year. You just keep engaging with them, getting feedback along the way, and it's continuously improving. Then finally, once you've got that, you have to sell your idea as part of this event, communicate your proposition and opportunity, and this is also trains the people to do public speaking. We have a great diversity of different people. As I said, we have, you know, 50% students, 50% working professionals. This last event we had 45% female, different age diversities as well. So everyone's coming along, and it's a learning experience. And the kind of projects that have actually happened, the winners, because there is prize money, 3,000 prize money. Actually, when you look at it, it is like a lot of kind of social, environmental problems. As you can see some here, it's communicating to your loved ones when they're in care, saving the NHS. Hector Help was a bullying app, stress and anxiety, and yeah, a whole bunch of different ideas there. And moving on, those are the runners-up. These are actual winners. The first winner was a library in your pocket. Amazing idea. We had the head of libraries from the Norfolk County Council actually attended the event as a participant and pitched an idea, got a team and got his idea built. Making churches everyday places, that was 5-6 years ago, and then kind of our bookings app is the answer to that. That didn't actually go anywhere at that point. We've got recycling and the Safe Point there are actually sort of still going. But although it was a great event and I'm still doing it, it's still kind of failed, still disconnected in a way. So the bottom-up approach, you know, we talked about the top-down approach. The bottom-up, you know, the ideas fizzle out after a while because you don't really have a sponsor. You know, the higher-up orgs, you know, with the Norfolk County Council, even though the head of libraries had his idea a reality, he didn't actually take it any further, which was a great shame. But this year we got a request from Norwich Business Improvement District to work with them, and it was our first time we made it a themed event. And the topic was upcycle, which was a real local problem in trying to achieve the amount of waste we upcycle and removing it from landfill. And that event was dedicated to that problem. And it was, Norwich Bid had won an EU fund to look at it. And this really showed a lot of promise, a lot of progress was made. And I'm really happy to say that the winning team, as actually a couple of the people have quit their job. They've been pitching, because it's part of an EU project, they've pitched it to the EU, probably the last bit of funding we'll ever get from them. But this is really making an impact, and that's kind of, where I was when actually I had a call from Tim. So shortly after that, I got a call from him. And he told me about the work he's doing with Scribe. He told me about you guys. He told me about the town and parish council community. And I actually really wasn't too aware of it. I thought parish was some kind of a thing connected to the church. And he told me about it being the closest tier of government connected to people. And that you guys have lots of challenges, working under pressure. You are in survival mode. And there is a really daily need to help out with where technology could help you guys out. And also he talked about how happy you guys were to talk to us and tell us your problems, which I've never really experienced that before, where you're working so closely with people and you're getting all this feedback. And this is where I really drew the dots from Sync the City, the last event, and Scribe, and said actually the town and parish councils in the middle there, that's a great opportunity, and perhaps we could take what we've done with Norwich Bid and repeat it. And really Scribe is already adapting some of those best practices in terms of that innovation we experience at Sync the City about education, listening and iterating. So that's where we're at, and that's why I really got excited, and I'm very excited about joining Scribe. We are, really trying to empower local communities, enable them to work smarter, doing the continuous learning, such as we're doing with Scribefest today, but also our Scribe Academy and the Facebook communities. You're all supporting each other. As a team, we are working with you guys, and you're going to hear more about that in a minute, to kind of understand both sides of the the different parties and what we can do to help you. The thing we are good at is bringing technology, but technology, is there to serve the people. It's not necessarily the solution. It's something I've learned a lot about, and we have the expertise on iterating and building these purpose-built applications. So together, we can enable us to, or enable you guys to have a greater impact already what you're doing, beyond what you're doing in the community, and just make villages and towns a sustainable and prosperous place to work. So that's about me. That's my journey to here. I've probably gone a little bit too long, haven't I? But I'm really excited about going on this journey. I'm a few months in now and learning more about what you need. So I'm going to hand over to Mel and Jane, who are going to talk about our top contributors. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John.
So we're here today to lead from John's presentation, to present some awards to our top contributors. We call them the Scribe Stars, don't we, Jane?
We do. I'm very, very pleased to be able to present these to some of our customers that have helped us over the last year. So at Scribe we work really closely with our customers.
From the very first interaction with the sales team
to every call that you make to the support team.
Without you, we would not be able to bring solutions that work for you and work for your community.
So every time we make a change to Scribe, we do it off the back of your customer feedback.
And many times it's not just off the back of existing customer feedback, but off the back from feedback that we are having conversations with our prospects.
So today is a good opportunity to thank you, the contributors, for all your ideas, constructive feedback, input, and sharing examples of what you want so generously.
At Scribe, we take your suggestions seriously, and then we come up with like a version 1 of a solution, and then we would put that back out to our customers asking for feedback. We'll add some of our own ideas in, and slowly but surely the concept starts to come into focus.
So then our development team will build the idea, and our customers will test it, and some even use it for a trial term. Here's some examples of what you've helped us with over the last year.
We used to hear that Scribe is for smaller councils, and you're absolutely right, we were. That's because Scribe was built by a clerk in his bedroom once upon a time, and the main aim of it was to be able to work on a receipts and payments basis to help compile the AGAR Section 2 and help with the heavy lifting around year end.
So in 2017, our chairman and serial software entrepreneur Tim O'Shea acquired Scribe. Being a person with a long career running and investing in successful software businesses, he quickly realised that town and parish councils are severely underserviced, and that there are many solutions out there that could easily reduce the time that clerks and RFOs spend on administrative tasks, making them more available for their local communities.
About 2 years ago, attention shifted very rapidly to speed up the solutions that Scribe was bringing to town and parish councils. We invited you, clerks, RFOs, to tell us what you want next. The requirements for refined features around income and expenditure accounting came out tops. Things like budgeting multiple years in advance, forecasting, multiple year reporting, actuals versus budgets, and having an integrated reserve functionality, wasn't it?
It was. So in December 2020, we had an inquiry from Felixstowe Town Council. Being a very large council, they required more detailed reporting on an income and expenditure basis, including reports such as committed spend and 3-year forecasting.
Debbie, Ash and Sean from Felixstowe Town Council have been very engaging with our development roadmap and have shaped very much how the software works for them, but also for other large town councils. Without them, we would simply not have the income and expenditure features.
So many clerks have been really generous with their feedback. They've put us on track, and today is as good a chance as any to say thank you.
Yes, so an absolutely huge thank you to our top contributors for 2021, like Steve from Cumberbatch,
Claire from Tuckford,
Sean from Cambridge,
Peter from Prestbury,
Alice from Wellington,
and Kirsty at Broadstairs.
We could list names all day if we had to mention each and every one on how we could improve our offering.
So, our top contributor and winner of the first Scribe Star Award for 2021 is Felixstowe Town Council.
Congratulations,
Well done,
and thank
Felixstowe.
you so much. Brilliant. I would also just like to take this opportunity to ask you, our viewers, if you wanted to have a look at our software and let us know how we could improve things. Please drop the words, what should we make it? Just say yes.
Pop yes in the chat.
Pop yes in the chat. We've been practicing chats all day. So yes, pop that in and then we can get in touch with you after the session.
Okay. So at the start of 2021, we were delighted to launch our new bookings package on Scribe, and initially a handful of our existing customers tested this for us and provided us with feedback and suggestions to develop and improve it further.
We then made changes and improvements based on these ideas, plus some of our own, including things like adding a more modern feel to it, public bookings page, improving block bookings, and integrating it with Google Places.
So we had lots of input from our clerks, but one person who worked really closely with us to make sure we delivered exactly what our customers wanted was Wendy Alcock from iTown Council. And here's what Wendy had to say about her experience with Scribe bookings.
Well, I wanted to move my customer contacts from telephones and emails to a self-service through our website. So the integration that Scribe Bookings offered with our website was far more user-friendly for our customers than our other previous booking system. And it allowed us to tailor how the interface looked and felt. It even allowed us to embed a video into the booking page to promote our town hall as a wedding venue.
Oh, that's great. And so what do you like about the booking system since you started using it?
So a key feature for me, apart from the online booking page, is the integration into the account system for invoices. So we have about 20 hirers in a month, and this has saved me time when raising invoices for customers. The invoices can be created directly from the booking system without the need to come out of one system and into another.
Lovely. And how was your experience in setting up the bookings? I know that we talked a number of times to get you set up and to help, but how did you find that experience?
Well, there's support from Scribe all the way when you set up bookings. So if you're an accounts customer, the supply record which you're using in accounts can be downloaded into your new booking system by the Scribe team. And any bookings that you have in your existing system can be exported in using an Excel file. So Scribe always listened to my suggestions for service improvement, and there have been many. And some of these have actually been included in the systems upgrade. So I'd have no hesitation in recommending others to use the Scribe booking system, particularly if you're already an accounts customer. You'll never look back.
Oh, thanks, Wendy, and yeah, thank you for all your feedback. It's been great whilst we've been developing the booking system. It's been absolutely a massive benefit to us. Thank you.
It's all right. You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Wendy. And so I would like to announce that our second Scribe Staffer contribution goes to Wendy from iTown Council.
Massive thank you, Wendy, for your feedback throughout the year. And don't forget, if you'd like to take a look at Scribe, just pop yes in the chat and we'll get in touch.
Thank you. The last thing that we really wanted to talk about today is NPS scores. So Jane, what is an NPS score?
So a Net Promoter Score is based on asking your customers how likely it is that they'd recommend your product to a friend or a colleague. The customer scores it on a scale of 0 to 10, with 0 being not likely at all and 10 being extremely likely. So a score of between 0 and 30 is good, but it means that there's room for improvement. Higher than 30 means your customers are mainly happy, and over 70 means that your customers absolutely love you.
So if we just think of some brands that we're all familiar with, Jane, as an example, what is the NPS score for someone like Apple?
So Apple's score is currently 47, which is a really great score, and they always achieve really, really good scores because of their excellent customer service.
Okay, very interesting. So at Scribe, we're in software and software development, so there's got to be some sort of industry average. What is the industry average of software development?
So software development is 30, which is obviously good, but there is room for improvement as well.
Dare I then ask what the NPS score is for Scribe?
Yeah, so I'm really pleased to tell you, in 2020 our score was 58, but this year we got a score of 77. So our support team are really, really proud of the score. We were over the moon.
That's amazing.
And we're working on even more ways that we can improve this for 2022.
That sounds absolutely fantastic. But as we've always said, and as we continue to say, we do like to share with you some of the fantastic comments that we've had off the back of that, and say a big thank you to our big advocates out there.
So we've got Nikki from Corfmullen,
Graham from Desborough,
Michelle from St Mirren,
Bob from Carnforth,
and Sue at Whittlesea.
We also have to have a special mention for local clerks. And we'll start with Zoe Gooden,
David Lines
and Rosie Hughes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So let's have a look at what Nikki from Corfmullen had to say.
Did you have any particular challenges that drove you to look at software solutions?
Yes, I did. So I took over and we were using a particular accounts package which I'd got very limited experience of, but it was incredibly complex. And a lot of the work that was required, such as quarterly budgeting and monthly budgeting, did require a download to Excel and then a lot of manipulation. So, for example, a quarterly budgeting report would take me 3 or 4 days to produce for a meeting, whereas now I can do it in an hour. So the difference is quite dramatic, and also I've got a much better handle on what is going on. It was very complex. The package before was not really designed for councils, it was designed for private business, which is fine to a point, but it's nice to have something that is specifically tailored for council.
Yes, thank you. We do hear that quite often, that it does help to have a package that's purpose-built for town and parish councils, because it's that management of budget to actuals, which enables councillors to make really good decisions as well for the community.
So our final 2 Scribe Star Awards for being top advocates go to
Nicola Gray from Corfmullen.
And Locum Clerk David Lyons. Well done, both of you.
Well done.
And thank you.
Thank you. So Jane, you're the head of support, and I would probably hazard a guess that you are the person that probably has your finger on the pulse with existing customers the most. What do you hear is the next sort of software app that our customers would like to see?
So at the moment, sort of most talk has been around allotments, having an app or having a facility that customers can use in conjunction with Scribe for their allotments. So I think that we should set ourselves a challenge.
Let's do it.
Okay, we would like to know what app you would like to build next. So we're going to pop a poll on the screen, and you let us know what you'd like us to build, and we will do that for you.
Yes, and I think we're going to push the product team a little bit. We'll see what John says, but we're going to see what the time frame is. But we're going to try and put like a bit of a time frame on it and say that we can bring you at least the version 1, as John's explained, within the next 6 to 8 weeks. Depends what it is that you ask. But let's see what the poll comes out as.
Lovely. So back over to you now, Mel.
Yes, so I believe we're going to come up for a break soon. I think it's our lunch break, and then after lunch we have the infamous Jackie Weaver coming to speak to us. Yes, like her or loathe her, she has had quite the impact on the industry, and if anything, I think she's brought it onto the map for those that didn't really know of parish and town councils very much, or that it wasn't necessarily in their conscience every day. How are we doing for comments coming in?
We don't have any questions.
No, I mean, are people writing in what apps they want?
Oh. Payroll's coming up.
Payroll,
yes. Payroll, yes. What else is coming through?
Risk assessment.
Risk assessments, yes.
Okay, yep, very important one.
I think especially with coming out of lockdown, I think we do hear that quite a lot. And I think while we're just doing that, I just wanted to again just reiterate the fact that we do accounts for receipts and payments and income and expenditure. We also have our booking system doing really well, and cemeteries, management of cemeteries with a mapping facility. And there's some really great exciting changes coming to that as well. So yes, a very exciting time. Anything else that we want to shout out from the corner?
Markets are not performing very well.
Markets are not markets. I thought, market stalls. I suppose not everybody has market stalls to manage. Anything else that we've got there?
Agendas and minutes. Agendas and minutes.
Yeah, that's a good one. I bet it's very time consuming, I would imagine. Joe, especially.
Yes, very time consuming can be anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, just keep it coming through. We will have a chat, and then we're going to go on our break, and when we come back we might be able to tell you a little bit more what the results are. But thank you so much for joining us. What time are we back?
Back at 2:05.
2:05. Lovely. Enjoy your afternoons. We'll see you later. Thank you.
Today we're joined by Debbie Frost and Sean Congy from Felixstowe Town Council. Thank you for joining us today, Debbie and Sean.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, appreciate it.
I wanted to start today and just ask you a few questions about your experience as customers as you've come across to Scribe. But for the sake of our viewers, can we just start with a bit of background about yourselves and how you, Sean, and you, Debbie, work together at Felixstowe Town Council?
Sure thing, yeah. Well, I started here as an apprentice, but ever since I've had a slight slant toward the finance admin side. That was the part that kind of made the most sense to me. We've been using an accountancy package beforehand that was, decent. It definitely had its pros and cons, but eventually, as lockdown kind of happened, working from home became more vital for a lot of people. We kind of turned our sights to alternatives, and considering we're a larger than average parish council, I think it's fair to say we did have quite a need for a good and robust finance package.
So Sean's the finance, he's the inputter, he's really in charge of the finance, and I just oversee it. One of the important things was to get it to do the reporting that our councillors were used to every month or every meeting.
Yes, you have a set of councillors that used to receive reports, and you wanted to keep that consistent.
That's right, yes.
I was to ask you what the main reason is for looking at another software solution. What problem were you looking to resolve?
I think the main issue with our previous accountancy package was I kind of got the impression it kind of showing its age. It wasn't very kind of moving with the times, I think, in terms of we had to look into running it from a VPN server because we didn't have access to our work server, which kind of presented a few problems with connectivity and latency issues. We would kind of get booted off sometimes. If any entries needed adjusting, it would be kind of a lengthy journaling process. Okay. And basically, when we looked at alternatives, Scribe was kind of progressive, kind of fresh, and open to customization, stuff that we really appreciate.
What would you say to somebody that's nervous about moving across from another accounts package, even if it is specific for town and parish councils, to come across to Scribe?
Definitely investigate, do your homework, and I know we're very fortunate because you let us have a child play with it, so we had a blank dummy to play with. So we did have a real good play, and we really tested your system. I think in a way when you were talking about how much you had to sort of mould yourselves to what we wanted in order to take us on, I think that's where a lot of that came from, was us playing with the system, saying, oh, and an example of that is we do salaries, we split our budgets. We have cemetery, some of it goes to cemetery, some of it's allotments, some of it's the office and different things like that. And I don't think your facility initially would split it in enough sections. I think we need 12. Splits one payment, we need to split into 12 different budget codes. But it was by playing with it that we discovered, and so it was before we even got it, that you'd altered that for us. So that gave us the confidence that it would do exactly what we wanted to do. So that's quite invaluable. So yes, it's definitely worth having a bit of a demo and play with it.
Welcome back. Was that our second lunch, or I don't know?
Third lunch. I feel like we've been lunching a lot.
We just had the cake. It's all good. Yes. So we're going to go into the final section of our day, the big speaker. But before, again, I mentioned Scribe Academy last time. We've got a bunch of events. Just go to scribeaccounts.com and find the link to Scribe Academy, and you'll see that we've got some extra training sessions there, particularly obviously budgeting is a big topic right now for the next couple of months, isn't it?
Yeah.
So we've got some topics there. We've then follow up with year end, and we'll probably do a few more. We're always adding there. So again, as I said, we have a mixture of webinars on that are accessible to anybody, and then also we have ones dedicated to our customers. So, that last segment, we tried to not be too salesy on that segment. We wanted to talk about why we're doing what we're doing, and celebrate our contributors to our solutions. We do have accounts package, we do have bookings, and we do have cemetery. So I thought, why not? What should we do? We've got prizes coming up. In a minute, you'll talk about them, but I think if anyone really wants any of our team to reach out and call you and get a demo on any of our products, and we can talk about, your problems and, what kind of solutions you're using right now. So it's like consulting or just a chat, whatever. You feel free to drop in the chat, yes, and then one of us will try and reach out to you as soon as possible. And we've also got 10 bottles of our very special Scribe gin to give out. So the first 10 people, or we'll randomly set first 10 people. Yeah, first 10 people.
First 10 people to take demos.
Yeah, to take demos, and we'll reach out to you. So we've also giving out some prizes later, aren't we?
We are, yes, we are. So we have our last speaker coming on, Jackie Weaver, and after that, if you could stay around, we are doing a random prize draw, so that would be nice. Some of the prizes that we have today is a wellness hamper. It will include a copy of Helen Lawson that you heard speaking today, her book Unlocked. We also have an Apple iPad, which I think would be really useful for some meetings for
very posh.
Yeah. We also have a £100 voucher for your local garden centre, and we have a Rehook bike helmet. There's a story behind Rehook though, John.
Actually, so yeah, one of the reasons why, so one of our colleagues, Wayne, he still does a bit of part-time with us, and I actually sort of initially took over his job because he went and came up with an idea and pitched it to Dragon's Den. He actually got funding requests from all of the dragons, and he ended up taking Deborah Meaden, and she invested in him a few years ago. The first product was making it easy to take chains off, and this is his third product. So it's a bike helmet, it's got integrated lighting and everything, so we're super proud of him. Still working with us a bit, but yeah, he's has a dragon on his side, which, you know, is always a good thing, isn't it?
It's great, absolutely. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, just get my headset back. DJ Mel comes back. DJ Mel's back. This is it. So, ladies and gents, the moment we've all been waiting for is our next speaker, Jackie Weaver. She's shot to fame through a video that went viral of a council meeting with Hanford Parish Council during lockdown. I'm sure many of you have seen it, if not all of you have seen the video. But Jackie Weaver has been invited to become an ambassador for compassion in politics, and she is using her platform to promote the importance of code of conduct and to encourage diversity. So a very important subject. Welcome with us here today, Jackie.
Thank you, and heaven forbid that I should correct you on numbers, but in my opinion you've only got 8 bottles of gin. Definitely one of them should be making its way to me.
I think that's a great idea. We will certainly have to get one to you, Jackie. Yes.
She's looking for a bottle of gin, isn't she?
Yes, absolutely.
I can't hear you, but I can work it out.
John can't even hear you, but he got the message, yes. Jackie. That's how good it is. So brilliant. Again, just to remind our viewers, pop your questions for Jackie in the chat, and we'll ask it afterwards. Jackie, over to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, and I do think it's probably indicative of the sector that actually a welcome gift would be a bottle of gin, because I think that increasingly over the last 5 years, I think those of us that support parish councils have probably found that life has got just that bit more hectic. Okay, I don't see you on this platform. And I don't know if any of you know me, and if you do know me, I'm sorry. And if I have ever offended you, forgive me. But my day job is not appearing on the TV, although sometimes these days it kind of feels that way. My day job is as Chief Officer of the Cheshire Association of Local Councils. Now, hopefully, if you are not from Cheshire, you are still familiar with the concept of a county association, and I hope that in turn your council has a good, if not reasonable, relationship with its county association, and in turn that you, as practitioners, get good support from that county association, because that is what we're here for. Often we hear about a kind of, not a north-south divide, but a clerk member divide. I don't see life that way. I appreciate that occasionally over employment matters it will become that. But generally speaking, county associations support town and parish councils, and the mechanism by which we do it is through our clerks, when they've not had too much of the gin. So, those of you who perhaps didn't know me before, suddenly saw me pop up on your, kind of for a while, everything, back in February. And it was one of those surreal experiences in life. I had a telephone call from a friend one evening who said, "Oh, you're trending number 3 in the country." And I did that thing that people do when either they haven't heard or they don't understand what's being said to them, where you kind of laugh to acknowledge it and then move on to something else. Because I can't tell you how little I know about social media and what trending means. I know a little bit more now, but I didn't then. So a little bit later, text message, "You're trending number 1," meant just as much as trending number 3, but the numbers had changed. You can see why. Parish council finance is not my forte. And so I texted my son and said, "Do I need to worry about this?" No. no, Mum, it must be a mistake. So, never gave it any more thought until the following morning, when there was literally news fans and reporters camped outside waiting for the door to open. And I had absolutely no idea what they were there for. I think what people perhaps don't realise is that the story broke in February, but the meeting itself took place back in December. And in those COVID days, I think all of us were struggling with the idea of Christmas, never mind anything that was going on in our work life. So when the first person talked to me about the handful of parish council meeting, my first thought was, what the heck did I miss? Quickly had a look at the link, just to make sure that, you hadn't had somebody walk past in their underpants or something that I hadn't noticed. But no, everything looked pretty much as I remembered it. Not pleasant, but as I remembered it. And that's how the story broke. It was, like all council meetings at the time, put on the internet by the committee chairman. It was picked up by a young policy student in London. It was edited by his girlfriend, and suddenly, apparently, trending #1 in the country. And I was very surprised at the reaction that it got. My first reaction was one of fear. I think those of us who've worked with town and parish councils for a long time have been mindful of how difficult it is to encourage people to step forward as councillors, to encourage people to step forward as clerks. So if their perception of local councils was what they were seeing on the screen that night, that job just got harder. But the reality was that although some people did watch it like traffic accident, more people were suddenly interested in what is a parish council, and more people were asking themselves, how do I get involved? And so for me personally, I have to refer to my notes because there's been so much happen over the last, it's only 7 months, that it's almost difficult to remember, and it kind of feels like it happened to somebody else. So I've done Good Morning Britain, done it a couple of times. Steph's packed lunch, that must have been good because they invited me back. I was there yesterday for pretty much a full day's filming. I've done The Last Leg, The Archers, the Brit Awards, which apparently, and again, please do not underestimate how out of popular culture and social media I am. I'm old. And then radio, newspapers, and I have my own podcast and have just recently released a book. So it kind of feels like so many people found something of connection with what they saw in that video. I was surprised at how many people from outside the sector were contacting me by email and saying, I totally got what was happening that night. That kind of thing happens to me all the time. And these were not people in the town and parish council sector. Now again, I make another reference to being of a generation that kind of is more winding down than winding up. And my perception as a woman is that this was resolved, that we no longer had a society where men overspoke women, where women were constantly feeling undermined in meetings, etc. Because that hadn't been my experience for some time. And I just assumed that was everyone else's experience. So a lot of what was asked of me at the time was, by interviewers, was, why do you think this video went viral? And I would think to myself, well, foolish question. It's not quite how I put it in my own mind, but what a foolish question. Because if I had any idea how that meeting went viral, don't you think I would be a media mogul of some kind? But I do think about it, and I think for me, the biggest issue was that of people seeing karma. People felt that what they saw was appalling behaviour, and it was. And they saw it have a consequence. And often these days, whether you're talking about local councils or life in general, I speak again as someone with a particular perspective, it seems as if there are no consequences when behaviour is bad. I think that there was a bit more interest in local councils generally, so that perpetuated it. And I also can't get away from the fact that on some level, it was just funny. Now, if anybody asked me at the time, did I find it entertaining, then I don't think the answer would have been yes. But looking back on it, I think when you see someone, and clearly that happened to at least one of the councillors, who has so lost control of themselves that they become like a child that throws their toy on the floor, stamps on it, and then screams at you that it's broken. And I think that is something, when you feel that somebody has completely lost control in that way, you laugh. Now, some people will laugh because they just think it's funny. And I think other people laugh because of the discomfort that it makes you feel. But one way or another, people do find it entertaining. So have the last 6 months been a blessing or a curse? I don't know that you can give that a single answer. I think that people might think, and I certainly thought, that media events were far more glamorous than they actually are. I've done a couple of biggish presentations on TV, and in both cases were done in a warehouse where you might have expected them to have been a much more glamorous purpose-set building. Also, people kind of assume that you make mega bucks out of doing things like this. And again, you don't, although I'm really hoping that some gin comes my way. But I kind of look at it as almost a slightly different currency. If I want to keep getting attention for the town and parish council sector, if I want to continue to promote the idea that the community is really important, local democracy is really important and is a place where you can make a difference, that our local councils, although they may not be perfect as they are a perfect tool for making a difference in the right hands and encouraging people to think about whether or not they are the ones with the right hands. So on the back of my fame, it seems really weird to use that word, but apparently I am, well, when you go to do a TV show, apparently I am talent. And I even get my own dressing room with a name on the door. It's such the strangest feeling in the world. I was delighted only 2 or 3 weeks ago to be invited to Guernsey. Those of you who know me know I'm not big on geography, don't do a lot of travelling. But a lovely organisation over there called Women in Public Life, again, particularly invited me to go over and talk to women, was a clue in the title, about how they might engage in the political system they have over there. And although the system itself is different, the message was exactly the same. Get involved and make a difference. And I'm mindful that a previous speaker today, Sue Baxter, chairman of the National Association of Local Councils, was speaking with delegates. And the likelihood is, but just in case she didn't, mention the Make a Change campaign with the National Association of Local Councils, again aimed at encouraging people to get involved. But I recognise that pre-February of this year, no matter how hard I worked, no matter how hard I worked in Cheshire, I just wasn't making any impression on raising the profile of town and parish councils. So the media interest, as I said, that I get allows me to keep going out and spreading that message. And yet there still seems to be an awful lot of work left to do. One of the things that I've spoken about, I hope passionately, because I feel passionate about it, is the code of conduct. Now, for me, as a working county officer, having dealt with more code of conduct issues than I could swing a cat at, the endless frustration of everyone involved in the process is palpable. You can see bad behaviour, you know it's there, you can demonstrate it, you can prove it, you can write a 56-page report on it, and you're still left with the only sanctions being suggesting that the member takes training and removing them perhaps from committees. And the frustration of that, of course, was that if they were the personality type that was likely to undergo training, we wouldn't have had a code of conduct issue with them in the first place. So we have a petition, myself and some colleagues, on the gov.uk website, calling on the government to look again at introducing sanctions for bad behaviour by local councils. And there is, I'm afraid, some resistance from government. It does not seem to think it's necessary. We think we're looking for something proportionate. It's not as if we're asking for people who have broken the code to be put in stocks and flogged. No, we're definitely not asking for that. But we are asking that we should be able to at least remove them from office or from acting in their official capacity for a period of time. And that, to my mind, seems proportionate. And if you have the chance, please do have a look at the website, give you a link for it later, and look at signing up to it, because it is depressing how few people actually make the effort and sign the petition. The other one that I feel very strongly about is virtual meetings. Now, when they were first introduced, I can't even remember when they were first introduced, must have been May. They were an imposition. We all felt that COVID was only going to be here for a short period of time. Keep your eyes shut, hit the gin a bit harder, and we'll all come out at the other end quite soon. And it was clear that actually that isn't what happened. So we had virtual meetings introduced, a lot of resistance to start off with, but I do think that most councils, by the time we hit May this year, were of the view that there is a benefit in being able to hold virtual or hybrid meetings. And I mean that it should be a facility, not an order. And then it's up to the common sense of the council to use it in the way that it sees fit. So either using it all the time in the form of a hybrid meeting, or using it for certain meetings and then having physical meetings for others. And again, we await the judgment of government on that. My personal view, for what it's worth, is actually this is more about not wanting Parliament to have virtual meetings than it is about wanting to have the rest of the country able to have them. So, in closing, what can I say about local councils? Difficult audience to talk to, because I suspect you know as much about local councils as I do. But I guess what I feel is that as councils, as bodies, we have changed, we continue to change, and we continue to grow to fill the gap that's been made by, I guess, a retreating principal authority in most areas. And I think, finally, the message that I hope to leave everybody with when they invite me to speak to is that actually each of us is making a difference. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Jackie. I really personally as well feel very strongly about the message of making local politics more accessible. So that is a brilliant subject, and thank you so much for joining us today. Would it be okay for us to ask you 3 questions? Fantastic. I'm going to hand you over to Jo. Jo Peters used to be a clerk for 15 years and Silco qualified, recently joined Scribe. Super excited. She said she'd really like to ask the questions to Jackie. So here we go. Over to Jo.
Hi Jackie, thank you so much, and it's great to have you with us today. I personally think you are great, and you handled the handful of PC meetings so professionally. So, question 1. I have a question from one of our members today to say, how do you cope with members of the council who are critical of the work of the parish or town councils and are also aggressive, maybe at meetings?
That's a really interesting question, and I guess part of it is missing, and that's kind of like the context bit, because I think how you deal with it depends on who you are. I was really lucky at Handforth meeting that I was not directly employed by Handforth. Okay, there were members and we'd been called in to help them, but it put me in a unique position as compared to, I mean, their clerk was suspended, but as compared to their clerk, because I am able to take actions in that capacity that perhaps the proper officer or clerk wouldn't have been able to take. I think that often our clerks take more responsibility for members' behaviour than they should. I think members' behaviour is really an issue for members, and I don't think that we put enough support in for our chairman to enable them to better manage meetings.
Yes.
So, I always promote the idea that, an ideal marriage, literally, should be the chairman and the clerk, and they need to work together in order to manage the council. And I think you mentioned also about criticism. That is an incredibly difficult one to deal with. Okay, you know that already. First of all, you definitely need to buy my book. But secondly, and I'll try not to mention that again, secondly, I think there is really something there for us as individuals. And I know we often talk about clerks, like they're an entity that you might go and shop for in Sainsbury's or something. Not a down-market supermarket, Sainsbury's or upwards.
Of course.
And we don't think of people as individuals. And sometimes I think that the clerk themselves take far too much responsibility and is far too involved with the individual members. Now, I don't mean that in an inappropriate way.
No.
What I mean is, often when we have a badly behaving member, a bit like children, sorry if there's any members out there, we do actually give them more attention. And my advice, I hate it when people say give me advice, but my advice would be give them less. So actually withdraw yourself more. You do not have to be available 24/7. You do not have to answer their emails within 15 seconds. And if their emails are rude, you don't have to read them.
Yeah, I think that's a great message today, Jackie, to all clerks out there, definitely. Helen has said, unfortunately, a lot of bullying happens. Do you feel it would help if the clerk had a different title to gain more recognition for them?
It's a really interesting point. And I know that, certainly in Cheshire, and I'm sure it's reflected throughout the country, many councils do that, so that, our larger town councils, our clerk is more often referred to as chief executive or something like that. And in my experience, are just a sort of below. So I don't think it's that. I think it starts with that. Again, I'll go back to repeating it there. It goes back to the importance of that relationship between the clerk and the chairman. So that if they are a cohesive and competent and confident team at the top, then it doesn't matter what you call the clerk, they will be respected.
Yes, I agree, and this is why chairman's training is so important, especially if there's a new chairman in place, maybe after an election period, they need to make sure they ensure their chairman has a training. So, yeah,
can I just... You haven't asked this question, but can I just expand that question?
Of course. Yes, of course, Jackie. Please do.
Might be interesting and a bit new for us. One of the things that's coming through at the moment, certainly among my councils, is a recognition that the kind of people who make ideal mayors, can I call them meet and greet?
Yes.
Yeah, you know what shorthand, but you know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah, are not necessarily leaders of the council, as in a chairman. Yeah?
Yeah.
So there's real merit in the idea of separating out the two posts. I think that as councils we can do that informally. I think there is a way of doing it. But I think it would be quite nice, I know it's something that has been to national before, but I think it would be quite nice for it to have some national recognition as well.
Yes, definitely.
Actually, they're two very different roles and they don't suit one person.
No, yes, I agree entirely with you there, Jackie. Norma asks, are the councillors who acted so badly at the Handforth Parish Council meeting still councillors, please, Jackie?
A yes and a no. You probably know them, not by their names, but Alad's iPad has resigned. And of course, as you know, Alad's iPad was a very large iPad and it had to be held by two people. But his dad's gone relatively quiet at the moment. The gentleman who comes out with a very profound statement, which I think clarifies everything, the chairman of the council is the chairman of the council, which I think is very profound. He has resigned from the council, and the chairman, this was in April, so stepping down as chairman anyway, has stepped down as chairman. But interestingly, and this is just gossip, the chairman put out his own YouTube video. He clearly commissioned one and put out his explanation for what people saw at the meeting and how his behaviour, acknowledged, fell below the desired, but he was provoked, which I watched with some trepidation because I thought, did I miss something? I think as officers, we often do take a lot of responsibility on ourselves, although I've just been telling you not to.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And as I listened to it, I thought, you can't be hearing the same things as I'm hearing, because everything in that video kind of supported everything that we knew already.
Yes.
I think the only thing he did say, which I thought was very naughty and very misleading, was he implied that the video was truncated.
Oh.
Now, it wasn't.
No.
It was certainly cut, but you see the video from when the meeting starts, with the chairman and I discussing what time it is. You would have thought you could have disagreed about that. Up until he leaves, and after that, we go on to have a very ordinary meeting. The other thing, just for the avoidance of doubt, but as practitioners, we like the detail, don't we?
Yes.
I never kicked them out of the meeting. I put them in the waiting room. For me, there is a huge distinction there.
Yes.
And as soon as the meeting started properly, the meeting resolved to exclude them. Wow. So again, not a lot of point in spending time trying to explain that to the media. But as practitioners, I suspect they might be interested.
Ah, that's very interesting, isn't it? Yeah, thank you for sharing that with us today, Jackie. I'm going to hand you back to Mel now.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Jackie Weaver. It's been really insightful to have you here. We're having a lot of good questions coming through. We might have to see how we could deal with them after the event as we're running out of time. But thank you so much for joining us.
You're very welcome, and if you want to forward the questions, I'm more than happy to write an answer to them.
Oh, fantastic. Yes, we will do that. Thank you so much. I also just at this point probably want to remind everybody that there is a couple of Facebook groups. Yes, Scribe have set them up, but you do get some peer support in them. One being the Mastermind, Council Clerks Mastermind group. Go and find it on Facebook and ask to join it. That is exclusively for clerks, because we do want them to feel like they've got a private place where they can safely ask their questions. There's daily so many good questions in there, and a lot of good answers where your own community answers yourself. The other one is we don't want councillors to feel like they're out in the cold at all, so we have created one called the Councillors Corner. Is that right? Mm-hmm. Yes, so we've got the Councillors Corner now on Facebook as well. So if you are a councillor and you wish to be on the Facebook group, please join it and we will allow you in. And again, it just offers that sharing of information amongst yourselves as a community. Thank you very much. Brilliant.
Yeah, I think it's time to do some prizes, Mel.
I think it is time to do some prizes.
Hand you over to
We need to
Mel
do a
and
bit of
John.
an all change, please.
Yeah, and if you want access to those Facebook groups, Jess has just dropped them on the Zoom chat there, so go ahead and connect to them, and yeah, we'll see you there. Oh, so.
Great. So, how many people do we have with us at the minute?
270 people now.
270 people, and I just want to say thank you so much for staying with us all day long. That has been brilliant. So what we are going to do is we've got a little number generator, don't we, John?
Yeah, I've loaded 270 people up on it.
Shall we start with the wellness hamper?
Wellness hamper? Who's that from?
Wellness hamper. So the wellness hamper's got all sorts of goodies in for you to relax, plus a copy of the book of Helen Lawson. Let's spin the wheel. Let's see who we get.
Here we go, and then we'll ask Jess. We've got a number, and then I'll go to Jess for
Who will
looking
tell
up
us?
who it is. It is 122, Jess. Look up who's that.
Janine Smith.
Janine Smith.
Janine Smith.
You will have the wellness hamper sent to you. Congratulations. I hope you really enjoy it. And let's...
Should they email hello@scribeaccounts.com? Or
Yes,
you
do
got...
that.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, we can
just
get
in
their
case.
details, but just in case you don't...
Okay, again.
Yes, go for it. The next one, let's just start. The next one will be for the Rehook Bike helmet.
Rehook bike helmet. Do you want to do a drum roll? There we go.
We have
212.
Same numbers, just in a different order, John. 122 and now it's 212. Who's 212, Jess?
That one is Mike Eccles.
Mike Eccles.
Eccles. Cool.
Well done. Email hello@scribeaccounts.com.
Bike helmet has got integrated lighting system so it should be good.
That's brilliant. Does it help to keep you safe?
Yep.
Fantastic.
See.
Right, £100 voucher from your local garden centre.
Hopefully we'll get a gardener. It's 75. What's the...
That one's
No, it's
Pamela Kirkpatrick.
Pamela Patrick?
Kirkpatrick.
Pamela Kirkpatrick.
Okay, cool.
Well done, Pamela Kirkpatrick. Well done. I am really pleased to say, if you don't hear from us, email hello@scribeaccounts. I think now is the big
That's
prize.
the big one, the
Apple
iPad. Is this
iPad.
like, I was to say, are they going to get like a version 1 from 2005, or is this the
I
latest?
didn't do the shopping, John.
Okay, yes. It will be a modern one. It won't be a...
It will be. We're a tech company. We
brand
need to
new, yes.
Yeah, do
Great
something nice.
iPad. So
Apple
we need a
iPad.
special drum roll, everybody, for this. Come on.
Number 8! Woo!
That's Zoe Pritchard.
Zoe
Pritchard,
Pritchard.
you've won yourself an iPad.
Well done. Congratulations to all of our prize winners. That is absolutely fantastic. So I think that is the end of our day, John.
Yeah,
is
it's been
it?
an awesome day. We've never done this before, presenting, but it's been good fun.
Oh yes, we're going to give... we will look at who asked for demos.
Yeah, for the gym, yes.
And we'll get in touch with the first 10.
I personally would love to say thank you to our tech team from Norwich live streaming. If you ever need a company to really deliver excellent live streaming event, look them up. Do you leave Norwich? You called Norwich live streaming. If the money's there, you'll go, won't you? Yeah, totally. And also a personal thank you to my co-host Mal, or I'm your co-host, I think, and also our team at Scribe. Everyone's been working on it frantically over the last few days. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Jess. Then Jane downstairs, Alan, Evan, Hannah, Tracy. Everybody's been helping out. Really proud of putting it together. So everybody, have a good rest of your afternoon and weekend, and see you next year. We may even look at doing a hybrid event next year where we do a combination of physical people attending as well as online, so you never know. All right, cheers everybody.
Take care, bye-bye.